Good evening. How's the sound in the back? Is it okay? Our technician behind us will hopefully adjust it. Can you hear me now? No? Okay. Very good. Well, I welcome everybody to the November 2017 meeting of the City of Lake Forest Plan Commission. I am Michael Lay, Chairman of the Commission, and at this time I'd like to introduce the other 5 members of the 6 who are here this evening. At my far right is Commissioner Freeman. To his left is Commissioner Henry. Commissioner Berg is not here tonight. Then to my far left is Commissioner Pickus, then Commissioner Monica Ruggles, and then Commissioner Kerr. From city staff, we have Kathy Zerniak, the Director of Community Development here. Our first item of business is approval of the minutes from the September and August 2017 Plan Commission meetings. Are there any corrections or requests for clarifications? Seeing none, they will stand as approved as submitted unless there are any typographical errors or something like that to be fixed. Our first and only, or I should say the main item on our agenda this evening is the public hearing, continuation of the public hearing and action on continued consideration of the request for approval of a special use permit for a car wash, gas station, and convenience store at the corner of Everett Road and Waukegan Road. This is the third time the matter has been before us. It came before us in October 2015, 2 years ago. It came to us in March of this year. Now this is the third time it's before us. Since I expect this to be a lengthy meeting and perhaps a hotly contested meeting on both sides, I would just outline for you what our procedure is going to be and ask of something from those of you who are here. Let me first remind you that the Plan Commission is an advisory body to the City Council. We do not make the decision here this evening. If we take action on it, it is going to be only a recommendation to the City Council. It's the City Council's responsibility to finally decide this matter one way or the other, not ours. But it's been given to us as a standing commission under the city ordinance, to consider all sides of an issue, to try to shape an issue, to see whether or not full consideration has been given, so that then it goes to the council. Usually the procedure before the council is far less of a public hearing process. So our responsibility here is to listen, to consider the voluminous documents, the facts of the case and what's before us, and to make that advisory opinion. It's going to go like this evening. The petitioner will be given 20 minutes to explain mainly what's different in the current proposal from what it was before. And I would also say that that when it gets to the public hearing part of it, we'd appreciate you keeping the comments to what's before us, not to repeat testimony from the prior 2 meetings. So after the petitioner has 20 minutes, then the city staff will have commentary on the petition. Then there'll be questions and answers from the commission to the petitioner or to staff. And then once that's finished, then we'll get to public testimony. So just so everybody knows, the public hearing part of it will come probably about the middle of the meeting. So if the meeting goes 2.5, 3 hours, you can see how long it may be till we get to the public testimony. So I ask for your patience in that regard. I would emphasize that if your comments have already been stated by another speaker, you can simply state your agreement with the previous comments. There's no need to repeat the comments. Also, I request that you please be respectful of other speakers and all points of view. Please refrain from clapping or criticizing other speakers. No booing, no hissing. Keep it calm, folks, okay? So, and I would expect too, if the meeting goes, if it looks like it's going to be heading for about a 3 or 4 hour meeting, we will take a recess. Get up, have the commission stretch our legs and so forth. So with that, I will ask for the petitioner to come forward. Representative Michael Goldman of Waterway.
Can I ask one thing?
Sure, good.
Would you just make sure the presumption is that the commission has read all of the correspondence, and if they didn't get responses?
That's a good
we've
point.
read everything.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Henry. We have received documents this thick, and I rest assure all of you that we've read them at least a couple of times. So we've seen a lot of engineering studies, acoustical studies. We've read every one of the written submissions to the commission in terms of what people's views are on it. So we're fully aware of A, what the issues are, what any outstanding issues might be that getting public testimony tonight will be helpful for. So we aren't hearing this for the first time this evening. This has been before us for 2 years. Okay? Very good. Mr. Goldman?
Thank you.
And you have Mr. Patera with you as well?
I do, and he will be presenting in just a moment.
Very good.
Good
Please
evening again. My name, I'm sorry.
let me, before I go any further.
Yes.
I would ask, do any members of the commission here tonight have any ex-parte contacts or conflicts of interest on this matter? Seeing none, we'll proceed. And then let me just say too, I'll take care of a matter right now. For all of those who have registered to testify or think you might want to do it, please rise, and I'm going to swear you all in along with the petitioner. Okay? Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give or have previously given is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Goldman, please proceed.
I'll go in again. Good evening. Again, I'm Mike Goldman. Thank you all for your patience and your time. I know this has been ongoing for, as you pointed out, 2 years. I was looking at my schedule, and I was almost surprised to see that. So I'm here tonight with Nick Patera, who's going to present some items with me, Henry Dubinsky, who's the chairman and founder of Waterway, and we've got a bunch of several experts. We've got a sound expert, we've got a traffic expert, we've got a property valuation expert, and we have Alexander Sandy Stewart here, who's the owner of the property. So all of us are going to be prepared to speak as need be, answer questions. So why we've been here so long? Because we're patient, we're professional, and we're going to do the right thing. What we think the right thing is to, we just lost our AV here. I'll get started anyway. So the changes we've made, noise obviously was a concern we've heard, and we've reacted in such a way. What we've done is several things. First thing we did, thank you. I push the forward button. Okay. Oh, there we go. You got the magic touch. I don't. Okay, here we go. First thing we did is we added and raised fencing. We went to 10 feet, and we increased the amount of fencing. We extended the tunnel. What we did was we added 25 feet on the tunnel, and we pulled the loudest part of the tunnel, which are these, which is the blowers. We pulled the loudest equipment back 25 feet, and we built a sound deadening chamber around that. Then we've got a 25-foot area that's going to be a buffer area, which is also going to deaden the sound. We're going to install high-speed doors at the entrance and the exit that can go down between, up and down between each and every car. It won't happen between each and every car, and I will say that now that's difficult, but it will happen, and it's been modeled at 2/3 of all cars. We've also moved the dumpster. There was concern about where the dumpster was closer to the residential neighbors, and we've moved that. We've also agreed to put in new windows at our neighbors, at the office building neighbor on their western wall, and we've also will agree to put in new windows at the rectory to put laminated windows in. So we wanted to react to that right away. Lighting, also obviously a concern, all LED, all house shield, and we've got screening, and we've got we've got buffering, we've added landscape. This is a special use permit that we are going for, and I think it's important to remember that car wash and gasoline are both considered special use, are both considered uses in the special use B1 district. So this is not something out of the blue. This is not a zoning district that does not contemplate those items. So that's been very important for us. The traffic impact, we've got the traffic studies, and we can go deeper into it, but the big thing to remember on the traffic studies is that we have taken what was a series of curb cuts on Waukegan, and we've cut it down. We only have one full access curb cut now, and the northern Waukegan curb cut is a right in, right out only. On Everett, we've added a lane so that customers who, there is a concern that customers would drive through people's neighborhoods, but right behind us, and we've made a lane where folks can come in, go across our site, to go left back on Waukegan to avoid that motion that was so concerning about people potentially cutting through the neighborhood to get back left on Waukegan. The environmental standards, there have been questions about that. We use environmental friendly products. We don't use the worst chemicals out there. We use soaps and detergents that are environmentally friendly. The lines and the gasoline, they're all double walled. The pipes are double walled pipes. There is a computer that'll tell you if there's any gasoline that's missing. But we're committed to this site for many reasons. The biggest reason we're committed to this site is we think we want to be part of this neighborhood. We are all about customer service. We are all about the highest level of customer service and high expectations of our neighbors and our customers. And this is where we have distinguished ourselves throughout the country in all of our markets as the company who, if you want a car wash in your neighborhood, or if you're going to have a car wash in your neighborhood, we are considered the best of the best. That's not me bragging. Talk to people, well, that is me bragging, but talk to people in the industry. That is what we are considered. Lake Forest is also the best of the best. That's why we chose to be here. So we listened, we changed, and our plan was improved based on staff, based on what we heard from citizens, based on our own studies. And that's where we are, and we really look forward to hearing what everyone has to say, and now Nick is going to fill us in on a little bit more of the details.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Nick Patera. My company is Tesco Associates. I'm here to represent the petitioner. We have been before this board and this group before, and we did listen, and I think that I'm looking forward to showing you some of the solutions that we've come up with. We were asked questions about how can we make this better? How can we fit into the neighborhood? And so with that, one of the things I wanted to start with was showing the Settlers Square B1 district. We're at the south #1 area on the lower right of the screen. But you can see this is an automotive centric. It is a community center. It is walkable. It has a number of similar uses, not excluding Metra, Sunset, and a number of retail uses, the school, the churches. We can come back to this, but this is to establish context of how this facility fits in to the character and to the style of what's in Settlers Square. We can see the villas and the chateau to the east and to the south of our #1 site. That's showing how this fits into the neighborhood. The office is just above the #1 that accesses off of Everett Road, and you know the Everett-Waukegan corner. This will show you where we have made changes. The trash enclosure is a light gray box just to the south, and if this works. Oh, I don't want that. Good. The trash enclosure at our previous meeting was here. We've relocated it so it's more proximate to the building itself. The previous building, just so everyone in the room can understand, was stopping at this location about 25 feet further north. What we've done is move the building south. The reason that this took some time from March until now, the Pasquesi parcel here, the gas station parcel here, had a ComEd easement running east and west from Waukegan Road through here. We've been able to find out that that's a vacated easement. It doesn't have utility in it. Previously, we had stayed to the north of that easement and stopped the building. We didn't want to cross the easement with the building. So that's some of the research and the investigation that we did that allowed us to look more carefully at how can we buffer the sound. The location of the building on the north end remains the same. I'll show you more in detail what that's about in a moment. The landscape plan has basically reflected those changes. I can talk about Waukegan Road landscape to try and enhance the frontage along Waukegan Road. This is not just about the neighbors, but it's about how do we fit in as a gateway to Settlers Square. We can get into detail about that. This is showing some of the plantings that we're doing off-site, improvements along Mara Lane. The west side of Mara Lane, along the outside of our fence, has increased plantings that we're proposing. This blank piece of fence on Mara Lane is something that the residents look at if they're looking north or west, would be planted with evergreen plantings that are showing at this location. Again, I'm going to move through some of this a little bit quickly. We can come back if there's questions. This yellow greenish line is the 10-foot tall fence. We started off with 6, it went to 8, now it's 10. This is a solid board wood fence. There is questions about does it need to be stronger, heavier? The height is really the thing that matters. And so the sound consultant that we have has recommended that we go to a 10-foot height, which is not just wood fence, but masonry piers. Again, this is more for appearance sake to get the masonry piers, but it's going along the back side of the office building, along the exit side of the car wash tunnel, abutting the office building, and of course along Mar and along the villa to the south. The appearance again along Waukegan Road shows the building. This has not changed since our last meeting, so I can come back to this if we'd like, but again, the emphasis is to provide streetscape and enhancement to the foreground of the building. The building itself will go through building review board, but I think that the landscape, the building, and the site planning all has to work and be compatible with each other, and also compatible with Settlers Square and the surrounding B1 land use. This is looking from the south with an easterly view. The fuel canopy would be to the right. That's the retail store that you're seeing. St. Patrick's is in the background on the left side of the screen. Again, fuel canopy is what you're seeing above in the retail store. This looks like a familiar architectural theme with brick masonry and white painted trim, something that would fit into the Settlers Square area. This exhibit was done previously, but the blue areas show that we are presently today, Pasquesi and the vacant gas station site, only served by 2 storm drain inlets. One of the things that we wanted to demonstrate that we are improving drainage rather than just having 2 inlets that sometimes are clogged up, at least when I saw them, with leaves and brush at these 2 locations. These will overflow onto Mar Lane, and then this one just basically doesn't have an inlet at all and goes over to Everett. We're really containing everything and putting in modern stormwater management onto this property with 7 new inlets, and it won't have flow going off the property as it does today once this gets approved. This is just a cross section. Mar Lane residences would be to the right. The fuel canopy is to the left. So this is a longer view. Home, Mar Lane. And what we're trying to show here is that the enhancement off-site the 10-foot fence. The existing trees that are there today could remain and be underplanted with new plantings. The retail store is in the background. This is the fuel canopy. But the idea of having a tall fence along the property line to replace the existing fence and landscape was the intent of this improvement. Here we are with what we had before. This was when the building was shorter and it stopped at the Pasquesi line, and that's where the easement was located. A normal door was at the south end that could be open or closed, but not a rapid closing door. We did have a rapid closed door at the north end. Here's the changes that we're proposing: a rapid close. This is a quick roll up, quick roll down. Mike Goldman explained that this is going to be employed for 2/3 of the cars that come in and out, but there will be openings and closings. The car wash tunnel runs through, and then the blower area is now contained in a room that you can drive. The car will be conveyed to this, but there's an internal division wall in 2 locations to deaden the sound of the blowers. And not just that, that the one wall south, one wall north within the, call it the blower chamber area. Once that's done, the blowers are off, the car goes to this sound attenuation. This is basically just a baffle room that has no equipment in it. And then the opening and closing of that door would be operated with the fast roll-up door again. So these are all changes that came with this 25-foot addition that basically still has the same length of the car wash, but we started it rather than where the building was. We're starting it sooner, but putting in a rapid closing door, which we didn't have before, out of concern of the neighbors that would be worried about the south door. These are some of the lighting studies. We can get into that, but basically the lights would operate to serve the fuel canopy and the drying areas. I can come back and show you this, but basically the lights are coming on. If it's dark out on a winter morning, we can have some light on, but otherwise they're turning back off after the facility is closed. So this is the fuel canopy lights are shown at this location. These have the high cutoff. I'll show you in a second what that looks like with the house side shield on the Marlane and the Villa side. This is the drying air or vacuum area where you would get your windows and interior cleaned, again off closer to Everett Road and Waukegan Corner. After everything's closed, lights are off, the place goes to sleep. This would be a 10 o'clock time. The building itself might have some security lights at doors. The light fixtures themselves would have the house side shield on the sides of those lights that are near the residences. The canopy lights are recessed up into the depth of the canopy. The fast roll-up doors, some of you may have seen these, but that they go up pretty quickly so that they can close and open, let a car in or out, are now on both ends, the entry as well as the exit. This is a heavy type of a door, but it's not a rigid metal or fiberglass door. It's actually a heavy-duty fabric door. If you've seen these before, you may know what I'm talking about. Now to sound, I think this was the critical point. One of the things that we really, and this is absolutely technical, the sound report takes a great degree of study to understand how this has been studied. But basically, what...
Speak up, please. We can't hear you back here.
Yep. Thank you. We have a Shiner and Associates has been prepared this, and Brian Homans is our sound expert. We can come back and talk to Brian in particular about sound. The baseline for Illinois noise control is a 55 decibel baseline. The homes that are on Marlane, 1059, 1051, are outside. It's quieter, and the sound today without car wash is below that. The one house at 1036 is within 55 or higher of sound decibel limits. as well as the house to the north and the office building and the rectory. That as we move through this with the sound, what I've tried to depict here is the amount of increase on decibels. In a minute, we're going to see what a decibel looks like, if it's a speaking voice or if it's a piece of equipment and that type of thing. But with the car wash in operation, the doors would open 1/3 of the time, 2/3 closed. The increase, as far as the sound report is prepared, shows an increase at the rectory of 0 decibels, 0 decibel, 1 decibel directly to the east of us, 0 and 0. This is while the car wash is in operation. This was asked for by the city's sound consultant, a fellow named Tom Thunder. And one of the questions he asked was, what happens in the when people get home, 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock? So what we really wanted to show was the ambient sound, again, is less on Waukegan. There may be still some trains moving, but that the sound level increase due to car wash is, again, back at 0 for the rectory, 0. They're in single-digit numbers as far as the increase if the car wash is in operation. Again, the car wash operations at that time from 6 until 8 is greatly diminished. There may be 6 cars an hour in these evening times. But again, what I wanted to be able to show you is that the decibel levels for the state of Illinois, what they're saying is that 55 decibel is the level which they're saying is nuisance type sound, and that normal conversation would have to be increased at 55 or above. I can let Brian talk more in detail about this, but what we're generating is somewhere in the 50s to 50s to 60s. This is considered, and this isn't our chart, this is a chart that we've got, frankly, off of internet, having sound comparisons. So we're in this range of 55 to 60 of normal conversation, but remember, the sound that you get from Waukegan Road, from trains, as well as the car wash, these are averaged over 1 hour period of time. So if it goes quiet, if it goes loud, there'll be fluctuations in this. As it goes up, as you can see, other elements, if it's 60 to 65 vacuum cleaner, lawnmower, I'm surprised we don't have a leaf blower somewhere up in the top end of this, but this was something you'd asked for, and we can use this for a reference point. As to coming to a close, Kathy, how are we doing on time? Close. I wanted to show you something that I looked at, and this is all available to you on the county website. 75 years of St. Patrick's has been here before, but all the way from 1939 and going up to 2015, when you can start to see the property where the villas, the chateaus were built somewhere in, I think, the 80s. This site that we're looking at was always a gas station. It was a garage. It was a converted to Pasquesi Farm and Garden. So it's not something that came after the homes, but this has always had vehicular use on this property, and the accommodations that we've tried to make here are attempting to listen to you and to make it more compatible with the neighborhood. I heard the beeper, so I'm going to stop at this point, but we can come back if we need.
Very good. Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Just to review, as was noted, this matter is before you tonight for the 3rd time. It is before you because gas stations and car washes are identified in the B1 district as special uses, which means that a public hearing is required and that you are charged with evaluating the use based on specific criteria, which are detailed in your staff reports, and there were copies of the staff reports in the back. I would like to use some of my time to allow some of our technical experts to speak. Bill Grieve with Gewalt Hamilton is our traffic engineer. He has reviewed the materials submitted, and I'd like to have him come to the podium and make a few comments. Tom Thunder is our acoustical engineer. He He has met with the petitioners, he has reviewed the information, and he has some information to share with you. We also have Dan Strand, our city engineer here, and Bob Ells, our engineering superintendent, who are available to answer questions. And I'll look for Bill. Can you make your way? While he's coming to the podium, as you move through public comment, I would be happy to review the findings, review staff recommendations. At this point, I don't want to take the time to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Hi, Bill Greaves, Senior Transportation Engineer with Gaywald Hamilton Associates. We've been involved in the review. Okay. Bill Greaves, Senior Transportation Engineer with Gaywald Hamilton Associates. We've been involved in the review of the traffic and the access and the circulation since the inception of the project. A couple of quick comments is that, we took a look at the KLOA traffic study. The numbers in there we concur with as far as the number of trips that would be going in and out of this property, where they'd be coming from, and the impacts on the various intersections, in particular Everett at Waukegan. One has to remember that the city has been working for the last several years in hopes of getting an improvement at Everett and Waukegan to get rid of some of the congestion and delay caused when the gates are down for the railroad crossing. KLOA studied it with the improvement and without the improvement, so they really provided a strong background of traffic analysis. Having said that, to me, one more, housekeeping, that there's some information going around that perhaps that the project is ready to get permits for their driveways from the Illinois Department of Transportation. We reached out to them literally the other day, and there's still some things that IDOT is looking for from the applicant as far as the impact of the car wash on the area itself. They're looking for an updated traffic study based on a series of different looks at land uses. And the biggest thing that they're looking for is a sketch that shows how you're going to get a left turn lane on Waukegan Road at their driveway to the south end that is the full access. KLOA assumes that people are going to turn left into the car wash out of the through lane on Waukegan because there isn't a turn lane there. That's one of our biggest concerns is that, think about it, you're heading south on Waukegan Road, the light turns green and you start going. Within a few hundred feet, if somebody is in that through lane trying to make a left across to get into the car wash, two things happen. One, I'm either backed up behind them, which could lead to a safety concern. The other thing that could happen is I want to get away from them. So then I swerve into the other lane. Neither one of those situations are really that safe, and I think that's one of the reasons why IDOT is looking for them to come up with a plan that shows how if I'm heading south on Waukegan Road, I can safely get out of that through lane, get into my own separate turn lane, and wait for the gap in northbound Waukegan Road traffic. I guess our other concern for the car wash operations is more on-site circulation. With the way that the site is laid out as far as access, as far as the gas pumps and the convenience store, and then the stacking into the car wash itself, a lot of people have to go on-site past all these things. You typically with a big car wash, I get in and I have a ton of stacking available for me. I don't have to go by the convenience store. I don't have to go by the gas pumps. This car wash company recently, within the last year, I want to say, opened up a very well-run operation in Northbrook, also on Waukegan Road near Willow Road. That site is a lot bigger, and as I get into the main entrance off of Waukegan Road, I have a choice. I peel off to the right to get in line for the car wash, or I go to the left and get gas, or I get around and get in front of the convenience store. I'm not making people drive past all those different uses. So I think from just briefly, that's kind of a summary of where we're at. I think the next big step for them is to make sure that IDOT is placated from the safety aspect of the access on Waukegan Road.
Thank you.
Tom, can I ask you to?
My name is Tom Thunder. And before I begin, let me just make one thing known in this room. Before you entered the room, you saw a blue sign marked Hearing Loop. My other company installed the loop in this room. Why? So that if you have a hearing aid and you have trouble hearing, you can flip to the T-coil mode on your hearing instrument and pick up the signal better than anyone in the room. So if you don't know about the T-coil, make sure you visit your audiologist to find out. If you don't have a T-coil and you have a smartphone, you can get a pair of buds that go into it and tune right into it with an app on your iPhone. Okay, something I think the board, sometimes we forget those things, but that little blue sign out there says it all. So I didn't want to put a plug-in for my company. I wanted to put a plug-in for Lake Forest, who had the foresight to be able to install that so that people could hear these proceedings a little bit better. Okay. As I mentioned, my name is Tom Thunder. What a strange name to be involved in the area of noise, I know. But the city had asked me to come in and kind of mediate, if you will. I find it interesting that this project here has happened to bring in what I consider to be the top acoustical engineers in Illinois. Brian Holman's working for the petitioner. I've known Brian for a long time. He works with Shiner Associates, very reputable firms, been around for a long time. Brian's done a lot of good quality noise control engineering over the years. And I'm glad the petitioner brought someone like him in as opposed to someone who really, maybe they're an engineer, maybe they're an industrial hygienist, but those aren't the qualifications that make an acoustical engineer. Brian has those qualifications. Paul Schomer, working for the residents. Excellent reputation. In fact, I think, Brian, you used to work with him at one time. And a great researcher. He knows acoustics well, PhD. He's authored a lot of papers and so forth. I'm somewhere in between both these guys. But I had an opportunity to meet with the team, and let me say it's a pleasure to be involved at this point in the process. And my hat's off to the Plan Commission, to the residents for raising these kinds of issues, because as Brian Fulwells knows, these are issues that are best handled at this stage. You don't want to build something and then say, hey, we've got a noise issue here. I hear architects and engineers say that, okay, let's just build it, and if there's a noise problem, we'll have somebody come in and resolve it. You don't do it that way. The best noise control engineering occurs on the design table in this process, and that's why we're going through this process. Paul Schomer had done a very nice study up at the Northbrook facility, same waterway. Let me say that it's the same species but a different animal. I looked at it, I went up there to visit it, and I would have to tell you that they have virtually no noise control. But that's Northbrook's problem, not Lake Forest. That's something that should have been vetted out long when that went through. To be able to take a look at that, the residents are close. It's something that should have raised more eyebrows than it did. This is a process here where, as you saw on the board, that a lot of things had been implemented. The first thing we wanted to make sure was that the ambient noise measurements were done at a good time that was representative of when the residents would be home. As Paul Schomer had mentioned, noise issues has a lot to do with expectations. Not so much the dB numbers, but the expectations are pretty much held by what the existing ambient noise levels are, whether they're high or low. If you're in an urban environment and the levels are high, this car wash should probably be no problem at all without any noise control issues. On the other hand, if it was built out in McHenry County, out in the rural areas, it could be a really serious problem. So expectations is largely what the ambient noise levels are out there. We wanted to make sure the petitioner was able to take those measurements in an area that was representative of where the residents would be, not close to the road, and at a time level that they would be home, expected to be home, and want to enjoy their property and so forth. And this they did, and this is in their report. As expected, those levels went down. They went down, but so did the average level on page, I think on table 2 in the report. Brian Holman's had showed his conclusions and so forth. He's based them on the Northbrook facilities, so he's got good source data to work with, not just some data pulled off of the literature. So it's real data from a real operating store applied in this situation. The computer program that was used certainly meets the international standards organizations for predictions and so forth. It's a fine program. It's used well throughout the world in terms of predicting sound levels. It generates a whole bunch of fancy contours, as you could see there, but my real concern is not so much the contours, but what are the levels at the residence? What are they going to experience? And these are things that he had calculated. And in table 2, you can see there where he had mentioned what the increase in noise levels would be. And those increases were very minor. Why are they minor? Well, for one, the area is not a quiet area. You are next to a 4-lane, very busy highway. You're next to the metro lines and so forth. It's not exactly the quietest area that you have, but the point is that a baseline was established, a benchmark, an ambient noise level. And aside from the numbers and the complexities of the Illinois regulation, you just need to know really one thing, is how audible is this car wash going to be? And what is the frequency of the number of washes? Why is that important? Because it's a dose concept. How people and how humans respond to noise is very much a dose-related concept. For example, I grew up in Park Ridge, lived right next to O'Hare Airport, probably why I got into the noise area. And I could tell you that if just 1 or 2 airplanes flew over in an hour, it wouldn't have been an impact. It would have messed up the TV. Maybe I missed a punchline or 2 or something like that. But if it only occurred a few times in an hour, it wouldn't be the impact. But what is actually happening out in Park Ridge is those planes are flying over every 3 minutes. So even though the level of the planes is the same in each case, we would all agree that because it occurs every 3 minutes, it's got to be more of an impact. So that is why Brian had taken that into consideration, is the number of washes that are going on. So his assumption was about 25 washes per hour was based into this. And even though the ambient noise level we found was lower in the 7 to 8 o'clock time range, the number of washes also dropped down to about 5 cars per hour. So it was a wash, if you will, in terms of the impact. So we have that resolved. The last thing that causes an annoyance, and this is not a hearing loss issue, this is not a thing that's going to cause hearing loss, tinnitus, it's not even really a speech communication issue, it's a pure annoyance issue. One of the elements of annoyance can also be the character of the sound. Is that character adverse? And by adverse, I mean a hammering sound, a very low frequency sound like the bass sound coming out of a person's car sitting next to you at the stoplight. You know, you hear that thumping sound. That's what we call an adverse character. And another adverse character would be a droning, humming sound. Now, in Paul's report, I did see that was mentioned in Northbrook, but I didn't see any data in his report that investigated that more. If there's a humming sound and there's a belief that that's an issue, that brings an adversity to that sound, I would have expected to have what's called a frequency analysis to identify what that tone is and how much that tone sticks up out of the ambient noise to tell me, is this an adverse sound? In fact, the state of Illinois has a rule against what's called prominent discrete tones. And they ask you to go through that kind of analysis, because if you go through that analysis and you find that you have an adverse character, it basically makes the limit more restrictive. And I did not see that. I did not see that. I can tell you, though, that with the petitioner's design for engineering, and you saw it on the board with the attenuating area, with the 10-foot wall fence, those are things that are just going to reduce the overall noise, period. And my recommendation to the town is, and it's something that is probably agreed on between Brian and Paul as well, is to do essentially what Brian had done, is to do a post-construction survey to determine what the hourly time average level is, and then take out the car washes. Now that can be done with an audio recording. I do it all the time. To do and set up a recorder that can record for several hours, and you determine what the hourly average for each hour is after 3 p.m., after 4 p.m., but just be sure to get into the evening hours and determine what that is, and then go back into that recording and extract out the times that the blower's on so you can determine what the ambient level is. In other words, what it would be without the blowers. And if it doesn't exceed the ambient by a significant amount, then you really have no problem. And Brian's report said that he expected at most, 1 or 2 dB or something like that. Typically, when doing acoustical studies, we usually use a 2 dB factor. We give the petitioner allowance of 2 dB. That's a margin of error, margin of error confidence, and so forth. That's typically used in acoustics. So my recommendation is, if it doesn't exceed by more than 2 dB the ambient at any one of those hourlies, then you shouldn't have a problem. Okay?
We'll have questions for you,
Sure, I'm sure you will.
several. Kathy, did you want to have one more step?
Just
Or-
one other comment, just to reiterate, Mr. Chairman, as you said, the Plan Commission, your action is a recommendation that will then go to the City Council. So at the end of the night, regardless of what your recommendation is, this matter would then next go to the City Council. And I'd be happy to answer questions or provide more information later in the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Next is questions and requests for clarification from the commissioners to the petitioner or staff. Tim?
I know you said that the hours of operation of that the proposed store would go dark. Do those pumps not operate after the C-store's closed?
No, those would turn off at 10, and we are not a 24-hour fuel facility.
How come?
We aren't there to watch it. That's not something that we've ever wanted to do. We've never had that in any of our places. And frankly, we don't think it's super safe to have customers on your lot getting fuel when no one's there to watch.
That's it.
Okay.
I have one question for the traffic engineer, and then a question on the sound from both Mr. Homans and Mr. Thunder. Is this on? I'll refer to you as Bill. I couldn't quite make out your last name.
Okay?
This summer, Old Elm Road was under construction and was closed down most of the summer. When did that construction begin? And more importantly, when did the signs go up warning people that that construction was imminent?
I really couldn't tell you the exact schedule. What I can offer up is that just today, KLOA turned in an addendum to their original traffic information. They went out and recounted all around the site area, and they showed that the current traffic volumes are, for the most part, lower than what they were when they originally studied the project in 2015. So whatever conclusions they came up with as far as impacts on traffic in 2015 would certainly hold case today.
Well, but that was my question. You're showing, or the study is showing, 2017 traffic pattern as being lower,
Correct.
and I'm wondering how much of that might be attributed to the fact that Old Elm was closed for the summer, and I know the signage went up earlier. The traffic study was done around March 26th, as I recall, in the addendum.
I would have to ask,
Yeah, that was a city project, so the consultant, I'm looking at Bob Ells. I don't know that we know exactly when Old Elm closed.
Does the KOLOA
Late April or,
Did they know if they saw signs up when they were doing the traffic study in March?
you'd have to ask the traffic engineer here from KLOA.
Okay. It just seemed odd that traffic would have declined.
It actually went down quite a bit during the weekday evening and even on Saturday. In the morning, it did not so much. You're always going to find some fluctuations in traffic from day to day, from week to week, from month to month. But definitely the change from 2015 to 2017 was appreciable. I think the weekday evening was down 20+% overall. And that's a real number when you think about all the traffic that's going through Waukegan at Everett.
Well, and that's why I raised the question on the Old Elm
Yeah.
reconstruction. All right, thank you. Now, I have a question that I'd like to address to both Mr. Homans and Mr. Thunder. And Nick Batera brought this up a bit too, that it's not just this 1 hour average ambient background. If I'm a neighbor, I'm hearing these sound bursts that are continually disrupting what I'm doing. That's my layman's approach to that. Could you please each address that?
Well, I think it's been shown from a number of studies that people respond to the average sound, the amount of energy. As Tom pointed out, it's based on a dosage sort of thing. All the airport contouring is done on an average basis, for instance. And so this is widely accepted in terms of that people respond to noise on an average basis.
Okay, and Mr. Thunder?
It is an average, and a lot of people have criticized that average, but you have to remember in acoustical terms, it's really a log average. It's a average of the energy. I like to say it's a level weighted average, meaning that it penalizes the higher occurring sources. So if there's a high occurring sound, it in essence penalizes that. So it's not your typical arithmetic average. It's a special average. We call it the equivalent level, or LEQ. And I think Brian's referred to that in his report, numerous times as an LEQ. And a lot of lay people kind of, I don't know what that means. What does LEQ mean? Equivalent level is a time-weighted average, but it's penalizes the higher occurring ones. There's also some concern that if the noise levels, like you say, if you get a burst or two, if it throws that average all off, but the average is okay, how are we going to deal with that? That's something that the city could deal with and say that the blowers cannot exceed the ambient by more than 15 dB, as a way to cap that off. My biggest concern would be if the facility was open after 10, then that might be an issue, because now we're not talking about just average, we're talking about sleep sleep issues, and people can't get to sleep. All it takes is one burst like that to wake you up. We've all had that, haven't you? If something's happened outside, just one or two bursts and it messes up your whole night's sleep. If this facility is closed after 10, I don't see that as a real issue.
Another question, Mr. Homans, and then Mr. Thunder, if you saw it in the report. You've mentioned the car wash noises. In our last meeting in March, at least one resident brought up the issue of the gas pumps being very close to where they live, and the gas pumps are open for a longer period of time. Did you do any noise assessment around the gas pumps?
Yes, we did. We conducted measurements in Northbrook at the gas pumps and also at the vacuuming at the exit of the car wash. And we found these to be comparable to or less than the roadway noise from Waukegan Road in Northbrook. So this would include that noise. And this is reflected in our Northbrook measurements also.
And the number of gas pumps, I think in the last meeting, Mr. Goldman said where there are 5 islands, but how many pumps on those islands? How many actual fueling stations for cars?
5 fuel dispensers. Obviously, they have 2 sides, as everyone knows. So 10 fueling positions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Thunder, do you have any comments on Mr. Holman's gas pumps and vacuum?
Gas pumps or vacuum?
Both.
Gas pumps I wouldn't think would be an issue. Vacuum pumps could be an issue. Depends on the vacuum pump, and if Brian assessed it, I don't think that is a real consideration compared to the blowers. They have a lot more power to them, a lot more noise radiated.
Have you had a situation like this where the car wash is at an intersection and then it might actually create a distraction for the drivers with the noises?
I don't know. Maybe the folks from transportation side might be able to address that. I mean, I've driven by some car washes where I was stopped at a stop light or stop sign, and I heard the wash going on, and I looked over. But other than that, I really couldn't comment on it.
Okay. Sure.
With regard to the gas pumps, there is no auditory, displays or videos on the pumps themselves. They're quiet, so it's not like the Shell station that has gas station TV going on it. The reason for the quantity of pumps, that was a comment that came up. Do we need that many? And what this really does is it allows people to get to their business and leave quickly. If there were fewer pumps, you would start to get stacking and loading, which we're trying to avoid, so that the more frequent frequency of the pumps allows people to get in, fill up, and get out. The vacuum equipment, the actual mechanical equipment, is buried within the building itself, and there are only the suction lines that are going out of the building, so that you're not getting that whirring noise like if you would, have a vacuum cleaner running. So that may help with part of your question.
All right, and then you don't have any hoses at the sites that ring a bell as someone approaches?
Oh, no, I don't think
Okay.
so. Sorry.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Well, the engineers are, acoustical engineer, I have a question with respect to figures 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And this goes to the question of average hourly. And yet we've got before us only 2 time periods.
That's correct.
And what are the highs and the lows of each of these dB numbers for that period of time? I mean, you did the modeling, so you must know the highs and the lows to get,
I don't know that, but off of the top of my head, I would say maybe 5 to 8 dB higher for daytime levels.
so that's an estimate?
That's an estimate. I don't remember the
Taking into
numbers.
account the actual data you collected.
Right. And
So 5 more than 67 would be 72.
that's right. For a brief instance of time.
Mr. Thunder, could you comment on that? Because, and you look at the Shiner report on page 3, you've got the peaks, you got the low part and the peaks. Why didn't we have the peaks behind these numbers to take a look at? Because, the petitioner's acoustical person basically said they could go as high as 72, even though this report says they're 67.
On an average basis.
On a
You're the city's retained expert on this.
sure.
Please comment on that. That's what bothers me about these tables, that they understate what the real noise levels are. Sure, that over an average 1 hour period, and you selected 2 periods during the day, not 5 or 6. So I think this data is deficient. Can you comment on that? Am I wrong?
Well, it's the accepted practice worldwide to be able to determine the hourly average. In the state of Illinois, they call for an hourly average. But I think your question might be related to the earlier one that we had asked, that there are times that sound levels can get exceedingly high. For example, when that Metro train goes through, and Brian, maybe you can help
Right.
me with that.
71 to 73.
Yeah, and so that goes, what was the LAQ on that 60? So that's, what, 5, 10, 15, more than 15 dB higher than the average?
Right, and here the average was 60.
Yeah, so that's the situation where I mentioned that when a Metro train passes, it goes so much higher
Spikes.
that it could wake somebody up. It could disturb them out of their sleep. And so if this was a nighttime issue, those are things that you'd probably want to take into consideration, is not the just simply the hourly LEQ, but just how high do any individual events get. Some of the peaks there could be related to motorcycles traveling, particularly if there's a stoplight at the intersection and vehicles are parked and the light turns green, then sometimes you get people that really gun it, or trucks that don't have very good mufflers, or cars that don't have mufflers. So you'll get some fairly high peaks from time to time, but the Metro trains, obviously, from this graph are the biggest.
The Shiner person, have you done any acoustical measures of a similar to what's proposed here car wash? You know, where you've had the lengthened tunnel, you've got the absorptive panels, and you've got a partial barrier, you know. Have you done any testing of what the effects sound-wise are from a facility like that?
Specifically for a car wash, no, absolutely not. No one else would do this. As far as knowing what the sound levels are, we rely on our experience with mechanical noise outside, including cooling towers, chillers, things like that. And the ability of our modeling program, which was a $9,000 piece of software. We pay $1,000 each year for maintenance fees on the software. Our experience with that software and following up with the modeling, going out and field verifying if it's correct, if it's at least close to what's predicted. And so this is what we're basing
So
our,
basically, your numbers in your October 23rd report is based on assumptions and computer modeling as to the effects of the dampening, the extended tunnel, and the so-called wall.
engineering assumptions. Yes,
You're confident of those assumptions?
yes, I am.
Thank you.
I have a couple, if I could.
Sure.
So do we have an idea or an estimate as to what the sound level is of the blower in this extended tunnel with the sound dampening inside and the door closed? Because there was an assumption made that it would be closed, the exit door, 2/3 of the time. Do we have an idea as to what it would be if it was closed at all times while the blower is operating?
I
Would
guess
it be
the-
less than the ambient noise? Would it be more? Can you give us some idea?
It'd be less than the ambient noise. The door, the high-speed door, gives us about 8 dB of attenuation. We know that because we repeatedly measured it at Northbrook, and this was on the entry end. They only have a high-speed door on the entry. We know what the attenuation of that is. To be conservative, we didn't say that the door would be closed all the time for all cars. We said, you know, what if it's open for 1/3 of the time?
Right. What if it isn't, though? What if it's closed? Is it the 8 dB of attenuation? Does it, how much below the ambient noise level does it bring it? Can you give us some idea?
Probably by several dB. The blowers are the main factor in terms of noise here.
Right, and as we look at the sound studies and the measurements and the timeframes, I mean, when we talk about ambient noise, the blowers don't make the train any louder, and the train doesn't make the blower any louder. I mean, we're talking about noise levels, right, that exist currently on this site. And then we're trying to look at whether this will be higher or lower, because it's not additive, right? I mean, they don't contribute to the other being louder.
Well, the car wash does contribute to the noise in the area by some amount.
So
And we've quantified that in terms of 0 dB or 1 dB or 2 dB at the extreme.
And according to all of your testing and your opinion on this, that would not exceed 2 dB over the ambient noise.
That's correct.
Okay. I have a couple questions for Nick. I wanted to talk about the lighting. We talked about it last time, Nick, that it would be all downward facing,
Go ahead, yes.
right from the where the pumps are and all of that, the lighting.
Right.
You had a different view last time you were here, where you had a picture of someone standing on Mar Lane, looking to the west.
We have that still.
Okay.
My PowerPoint is kind of stuck. Kathy, I might need your help here.
Well, that's okay. Just what I was concerned, that image last time that we talked about was to make sure that the fence and the berm and the greenery, whatever shrubbery was going to be put in there, that would take away any potential for the nuisance of lighting spilling over onto Mar Lane or...
There's two different kinds of light, just to be very straight. The canopy itself has lights recessed within the soffit of the canopy. So by the virtue of the overhang on the canopy, they kind of cut off their own, call it spread. But it will definitely have light going down. This is for safety and comfort of the customers, allowing them to see what they're doing and operate safely. The pole lights that are around the perimeter of the property would obviously be above that sound or above that 10-foot fence, but that they have the drop house side shields on those, again, to prevent the distribution from going out beyond the property. And these are LED downlight controlled, so they're aiming directly straight down to the pavement below. On the pole lights themselves. But to answer your question, the fence, 10 foot high, the individual shown standing on Mar Lane, and the landscape will all help. But you will see that this is the lights are on, but you're not getting glare, which is what we're trying to do. You're not seeing an exposed bulb, but you're seeing the glow of the light on the property.
Okay. I have just two questions for Mr. Was it Goldman?
Goldman.
So is there a way to pace the cars coming out of the exit where the quick closing door can be closed at all times, the blower is in operation?
There is not. It will be the 2/3, 1/3 is, I think, that's a lot of wiggle room. I suspect it'll be able to be closed a lot more often than that. But the pace of the cars, it comes from one end to the other, and unless we kept people from coming in and then we'd end up queuing back, it just wouldn't work that way on a busier moment in time. I generally expect that the 2/3, 1/3 is exactly about what we'll hit, if not better, but that's why that was modeled that way.
So even at the busiest times, you'll be more like 2/3. If it's slower, it could be less.
Yes.
What about we saw a little bit of a reporting on the traffic or volume of washes between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. And my memory of that was that something less than 5 at the Northbrook site.
I think it was one night of the week, it was 6.8, then down to 4 on another night of the week, yeah.
Okay, was that your Tuesday night special night that it was 6.8?
No,
You know.
actually, I believe it was.
All right. So I'm just curious to know whether the petitioner is willing to accept some reduction in hours as it relates to the nighttime hours. You know, if we're talking about 5 cars and the staffing that it takes to run that, I think it would go a long way to mitigating some of this if there was a consideration to some of those evening hours. Have you given that some thought?
Well, for those 5 customers, that time is really important. Could I come back? Would I be opening to discussing maybe 7:30? Sure. But there are people who they come home later from work, and those are some really important customers who I guarantee you, if we talk to those 5 people, that's the most important time of the day, and we're about taking care of the customer. So, yeah, sure, we can mitigate it back a little bit. I wouldn't want to say I can go past much earlier than about 7:30.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Let me follow up on Commissioner Freeman.
Yes, sir.
January 21st of this year, high of 57 degrees, I stood outside the Northbrook thing. It was a nice day after some snow and that sort of stuff. I mean, that blower blew steady for the whole 20, 30 minutes I stood there in disbelief, frankly. And so say you've got a busy day on a day like that at a Lake Forest facility. In effect, aren't you really going to let that door be open the whole doggone time you got back up waiting to get in and out of that car wash?
At the busiest hours, that's why I could make that. I could say I could make that commitment of every single car. I just can't. I'm not going to promise something I can't give. The truth is, the difference. One of the differences between Northbrook and Lake Forest, and there have been several referrals to this high-speed door, is that the Northbrook does not have a high-speed door at the exit. It only has it at the entrance, and I know there's been some confusion around that. But it is, they go super fast, they go up and down, and much of the time it will be used. But I certainly can't guarantee, and I'm not going to guarantee something that we can't.
Mr. Goldman, is this new technology, these doors, these high-speed doors?
These particular doors are the old, new. There have been high-speed doors for a long time. The quality has increased to a great extent from where they were, and we hadn't trusted them. We'd had some other kinds of high-speed doors that had broken on us consistently. We hadn't trusted them until we brought in the ones at Northbrook, or the one at Northbrook, and now we trust it. It works. It goes up and down at that entrance between every car.
Let's assume that the exit door goes out of commission. How long is it going to take to get that fixed? Either replaced or repaired?
We have technical maintenance people in every market who know how to fix stuff. So can I tell you how there'll be somebody on call, and every distributor, as you all know, in many different worlds, the distributor will have somebody. If we can't fix it, our particular maintenance people, we're really good at fixing most everything. So if we can't do it within an hour or so, I would be surprised. And if it's let's say someone decides to run a car right through it when it's closed, which should be impossible, but the impossible can happen. It's going to take a little time to fix that because you'll have to get a replacement door, of course.
4, 5, 6, 7 days, maybe?
I would just be guessing. The replacement door, I mean, there's a distributor here in Chicago, so I would suspect a day or two.
Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Kathy, I'm going to test your memory here about the last time this property came to the Plan Commission in 2008. Looking at the site plan, the south entrance is in the same location as the proposed south entrance for this development?
I believe it's very close. This south entrance may have been pushed a little bit further south at the direction of IDOT, but it's very close.
And were there similar issues brought up with southbound traffic turning left into the property, and how were they addressed at that time?
Yes, similar issues were brought up about turns into the site as well as on-site circulation, given the fact that the property is a bit of an unusual configuration. I think with respect to left turns into that southbound entrance, I believe that earlier project was a bit further along with engineering drawings. And my recollection is that there was some kind of accommodation for some kind of a short turn lane that was established.
That's my recollection as well. Thank you, Kathy.
And Commissioner Kerr, I did get a response from the Director of Public Works to your question. Old Elm was closed right after school ended, so that was probably early June, and then opened in August.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify again from the petitioner, the length of this tunnel, the Lake Forest tunnel, is longer than the Northbrook tunnel because you've added that sound barrier at the end. Is that correct, or does Northbrook have that?
No, Northbrook does not have that. And Commissioner Lay asked the question, have they gone and tested that anywhere? They haven't, because this is something that has not been done, except that's one of the reasons why we had the experts take a look at it. So we've got this extra 25 feet of quiet area, and then the two walls to attenuate the sound and even greater. But it is, the tunnel is a few feet, adding the 25 feet, I think it's like 10 or 12 feet longer. I could be off by a few feet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, no further questions, petitioners or staff? Okay, then we will go to public testimony. I have quite a few registration slips. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call people in the order in which I received these. But please know, if you haven't turned one of these in, you will still have an opportunity to speak to the commission. So the first person here is Kent Carson, 1180 Lynette Drive, followed by Gary Spahn.
My name is Kent Carson, and I live on Lynette Drive in Lake Forest. My wife Sandy and I have been property owners in Lake Forest since 1985. We raised our two children in Lake Forest and are very proud of this community and what it has to offer our family. We hope Lake Forest will continue offering our daughter and her husband, along with their three children, the same safe and wonderful experience. I am here to oppose the Waterway Car Wash, convenience store, and retail fueling service station project. My opposition is based on my 36 years in the petroleum industry. I have witnessed firsthand and was involved in a petroleum spill, explosion, and fire that killed 8 people and critically injured 26. And also property damages to over 50 homes that were located nearby this facility. Dealing with flammable materials is a constant and cannot be taken lightly. A normal fueling station has on site up to 50,000 gallons of gasoline at any one point in time. While the petroleum industry has sophisticated equipment which is dedicated to monitoring the volume and pressure in underground storage tanks to prevent catastrophic incidences, human error may cause a catastrophe like the one which happened in Westmont and Willowbrook at the Speedway last month. Are you all aware of that incident? If not, I would suggest that you look at the TV footages of what happened, and also the remediation process and how disturbing that would be to a neighborhood. When a catastrophic incident occurs, it is much better for the city and its residents to have a vendor with deep pockets such as British Petroleum, ExxonMobil, or Shell, who owns the stations, and have the wherewithal and the precedent to remediate or remedy the damages of such catastrophic events. Jobbers or independent operators and owners like Waterway will declare bankruptcy and walk away, leaving the city and its residents in the lurch. Independent jobbers, like Waterway, neglect their stations as time goes on because there is little monetary incentive to keep the stations fresh and rehabbed after years pass. Moreover, with the coming obsolescence of gas combustion engines, the revenue stream for gas stations will shrink over time, again putting pressure on jobbers or the independents who will not want to spend money to keep their stations fresh. It is not believable that any prudent business who expects to have a viable financial plan would sign up to a long-term lease such as a 50-year lease that Sandy Stewart boasted about. No banker would finance a project for much longer than 20 years, which is the industry standard. Again, it is likely that the city would be faced with a vacant lot in the short term. Thank you for hearing my testimony and taking these risks into consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Spahn? Following him will be Robert Dempsey.
My name is Gary, my name is Gary Spahn, and I'm the owner, resident, and a board member of the Villas of Lake Forest, the townhouse complex immediately south of the subject site. I've lived in Lake Forest for over 30 years and raised my family here. The Lake Forest Code protects against noise offenses by prohibiting, quote, any and all sources, conditions, or situation causing danger, trouble, annoyance, or inconvenience to others, and which is detrimental to public health, safety, welfare, or property value, end quote. That's from Lake Forest City Code 95.001 and 95.002. The language used is similar to the language expressed as standards for special use permit and is a clear expression of legislative intent. Beyond the illegal levels of noise to be experienced by the St. Patrick Church Rectory and the office building to the east of the site, the Marlane residence is located on points D, E, and F, and the townhouse condominiums at G in Dr. Schomer's Lake Forest report are highly likely to find a readily noticed industrial scale whining from the car wash, exceedingly annoying, as have residents situated adjacent to the Northbrook Waterway. Since our residents are already close to the railroad tracks, the addition of a constant blower noise will raise the noise level to the breaking point. As a result, because the waterway project will create a nuisance on account of sound, diminishing the quality of life for all residents in the vicinity of the project, the special use permit and project should not be permitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spahn. Mr. Dempsey, and then Casey Schuff.
I can claim long residence in Lake Forest. I just moved in on the 1st of July. However, it's my house that's directly across the street from the proposed site. So I do have a personal interest, and I also represent the interests of my parishioners who use the church that is next door to that rectory every day. In fact, we have funerals and weddings quite frequently in that small church, and of course, the rest of the facility is adjacent to it. We've heard a lot of well-researched and well-presented numbers, but you and I know that the quality of life and aesthetics is not reduced to quantifiable numbers. We can all analyze what is involved in a Thanksgiving dinner. A meteorologist or a physicist can tell you what a sunset is, but you know what a sunset is by your own experience You know what a Thanksgiving dinner is with your family. There are other things and many things in life, the most important things in life cannot be reduced to quantifiable numbers. It does no good to say, well, if this noise was heard at 11 o'clock at night, it would disturb you, but it won't disturb you at 9 o'clock in the morning. That's rubbish, of course. It is already a noisy area. I live there all the time. The house rattles regularly because of the trains. Most of us who live there, I think all of us who live there, are not interested in any other entities adding to the noise. And to average it out over an hour or a day or whatnot doesn't matter. It's the noise every time the door goes up and the door goes down. That noise is there. More importantly, as I said, it is the total experience, the aesthetic of living in that neighborhood. That space used to have a little gas station, used to have a garden supply store. Now we want to put in a large gas station and car wash. I just came from Northfield. I live just about a mile and a half or two from the last waterway. I drove by it many times. It is a big operation. It's bright, it is loud, and no matter which direction you point the lights, you can see all the lights on the ceiling. If you don't look at them, they illuminate the whole room. And that whole area will be illuminated. That's why you put lights in a place, is to illuminate them. It will be bright. There will be noise. And we don't need any more of that. At least those of us who live in that area do not want any more. So I speak on behalf of my parishioners and myself, and that we are opposed to the establishment of this car wash. Thank you.
Please. Mr. Schuff, he'll be followed by David Kaz. Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am.
My name is Casey Schuff.
Could you pull the mic down so we can
Sorry.
hear? Thank you.
My name is Casey Schuff. I've been a resident of Lake Forest for 36 years. I live just south of the proposed project that is just south of the villas. The light pollution problems was mentioned previously, but not mentioned, however, is a stream of headlights shining directly into the church rectory. This would be extremely disruptive, as numerous cars and trucks will be pointing glaring lights directly into the rectory on a continual basis as they exit onto Everett Road multiple times per hour throughout the evening. Light pollution is extremely disturbing. Its negative effects adversely impacts the lives of those affected by it and should not be allowed, making the waterway project unacceptable. At the Northbrook Waterway site, very tall on-site street lamps shine bright, dispersing and disturbing intrusive lights into the neighborhood residents. It was not clear whether the proposed Lake Forest site is supposed to have such tall and offensive street lamps. What does appear from the waterway drawings is the bright perimeter lighting project from the tops of the canopies shining directly into the homes to the east and the condos to the south, disturbing the welfare and quality of life of nearby residents. The light pollution created by the industrial-scale car wash gas station disqualifies the project from obtaining a special use permit. Nowhere in the applicant's material does the applicant address the risk of air pollution contaminating the neighborhood resident community. In winter, after heavy snowstorms, and in summer, after heavy rains, a steady flow of cars will stack up all day, idling, waiting to enter the mouth of the car wash and clean off the salt, dirt, grease, grime, and mud. With volumes of vehicles predicted to idle on the site constantly on high usage days, the engine's exhaust will raise air pollution levels to dangerous levels for the immediate residential neighborhoods. Engine exhausts of this type are well known to cause health hazards. The city's own sustainability plan recognizes this severe health risk and sets out goals to reduce pollutants from the burning of gasoline and diesel fuel. Remember, these fumes are expelled 10 to 20 feet away from the neighbors' yards. how can the Plan Commission approve a project so contrary to the city's own goals and safety to its residents? In addition, nowhere in the applicant's material is there mention of toxic materials used to service motors operating the car wash, or gases emitted upon dispersal of gasoline and whether or not they add to the toxic environment for neighbors. Nor does applicant mention anything about toxic fluids that run off the cars in the car wash tunnel, or where they end up and how is the toxic industrial waste dealt with. The absence of any information of this kind alone disqualifies the waterway from receiving a special use permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kaz? Is David Kaz still here? Oh, yes, there he is. Following David will be Jill Kaz.
Hi, I'm David Kaz. I live on Mar Lane, lived here for 3 years. I'm going to speak to Waterway's what we'll call untrustworthiness. Waterway promised to conform to permissible noise standards when it constructed its car wash, gas station, and convenience store in Northbrook. And you've heard about this tonight. Moreover, Northbrook established permissible noise standards in its city code. According to Professor Schomer's reading at the Northbrook site, made on behalf of the Lake Forest Integrity Caucus, the noise level heard by the Northbrook adjacent homeowners exceed both the Northbrook city standards as well as the Illinois Pollution Control Board standards. And you can see Appendix 1A in Dr. Schomer's report. Dr. Schomer interviewed the residents of 4 homes and took measurements at 2 of the home sites. The measurements showed unlawfully excessive noise, which all the homeowners universally complained about. Homeowners had asked Waterway to remedy the noise problem, and Waterway ignored them. One resident sought help from the Northbrook Police, and we did get a copy of the police report. After the police took their own measurements, the results themselves proved excessive noise, but no remedial efforts were made by Waterway, and the complaining residents had to move out of her home because of a physical illness the excessive noise caused. Like tonight, much was made by Waterway of the car wash doors as a potential solution to the noise problem at meetings like this in Northbrook. First, despite Shiner's report, which projected mitigated noise level from car wash doors being closed part of the time, at no time during the unannounced 4.5 hours of Dr. Schomer's car wash was that door closed. So not 1/3, 2/3, any third, it was never closed. The noise persisted unabated from both the entrance and the exit to the car wash tunnel. Second, even if the doors do close part of the time, when the doors are open to admit cars to enter or exit, during that period of time, the adjacent homeowners will be exposed to noise above the permissible limits, contrary to the law. Third, and this is pretty disturbing, the employees at the drying stations, which work at the exit from the car wash tunnel, are exposed to irresponsibly harmful levels of noise because they are standing next to the source. It would be the same as standing behind a jet engine. Clearly, the conditions faced by employees will be harmful to their hearing, yet Waterway has taken no steps to protect its employees from the harmful effects of the persistent excessive noise. We had mentioned twice before that a wooden fence proposed by Waterway, 8 feet, 10 feet, whatever, as a barrier is inadequate. It does not suppress noise, does not inhibit fire, and when hit by cars or wind, will fall down. Our expert told us that brick or stone walls were far more effective. Waterway ignored that issue. It is inconceivable for the Plan Commission to invite a business to operate in Lake Forest when the business has a history of flagrantly violating the laws of its host city in a neighboring district and ignoring the welfare of its own employees and its potential neighbors. We are not Northbrook.
Ms. Kaz, following Jill will be Jim Monroe.
Good evening. My name is Jill Kaz. I have in my hand over 500 signed petitions from West Lake Forest, East Lake Forest, North Lake Forest, South Lake Forest, all parts of Lake Forest. May I bring these up?
When you finish speaking, could I have you take it over to the director?
I will
Thank you
show
very
you.
much.
How many?
Over 500 signed petitions, including 140 of them directly from parishioners of St. Pat's. So I'm going to be speaking again about how Waterway fails to conform to the Lake Forest standards. So, Lake Forest Chateau Homeowners Association previously submitted its brief at the March 8th, 2017 hearing of the Lake Forest Plan Commission in response to the petition of Waterway. The Lake Forest Integrity Caucus has subsequently engaged its own independent experts that we've heard about tonight to investigate and verify sound, traffic, and safety issues, in addition to the real estate market expert it previously engaged, whose report was previously submitted at the March 8th, 2017 hearing. The current multi-part sound study was prepared by caucus expert Dr. Paul Schomer, we've spoken about quite a bit tonight, an adjunct professor of electrical and computer engineering and member of the graduate faculty of the University of Illinois, and a lifelong international research leader in acoustics. You can see in Appendix 1A and 1B of your brief. The traffic and safety study was prepared by the caucus expert Roy Luck, Director of Highway and Transportation Safety Programs at Northwestern University Center for Public Safety. You will recall the previous real estate market impact study, Lake Forest Chateau, submitted at the March 2018 hearing, was prepared by Michael Maroos, former chairman of the Finance and Public Safety Committee of Park Ridge, former alderman and mayor of Park Ridge, past president of the Chicago chapter of the Appraisal Institute, former chair of the Midwest chapter of the Counselors of Real Estate, and past president of the Illinois Coalition of Appraisal Professionals. This man knows his real estate. All the experts unanimously conclude that the proposed Lake Forest Waterway project is on so many levels an impermissible, non-conforming use of the subject parcel. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Monroe. Following Mr. Monroe will be Richard Sugar.
Good evening, everyone. Chairman Lay, commission members, and city officials. Because the outcome tonight has far-reaching and long-lasting implications, all that we ask is that you please consider the facts fairly. Tonight will be a defining moment for this commission, its members, and the city. You may recall a similar debate earlier this year in another community that involved a gun range and a tavern combination. That was a bad idea, as is constructing a noisy car wash next to a church and residential neighborhood. It's a bad idea because of traffic problems. Your traffic consultants have come forth with various opinions, as have your sound engineers. Everyone has a different opinion. All the traffic people have differing opinions. It depends on which expert you are going to believe. Which one is right? In developing the Lake Forest Strategic Plan for 2017 through 2021, the city's authors cited polling done to gauge the opinion of Lake Forest residents about issues of importance to them and incorporate them into the strategic plan. The strategic plan states, and I quote, about 8 in 10 of that stated that management of traffic flow and transportation-related infrastructure is very important over the near term. That was the highest concentration of survey participants' feedback on any one particular issue. In addition, the Lake Forest Sustainability Plan of July 2016 cites a 2015 study which ranks Chicago as having the third worst automotive travel delays among large urban areas, behind only New York and LA. The city's authors of the sustainability plan observed that Lake Forest experiences its own congestion, particularly on weekday mornings and afternoons during the school year, and that one of the chief goals of the sustainability plan is to reduce traffic congestion. Keep in mind that the last time a car wash was proposed for this particular corner, back in 1990 and 1991, it was not approved. Back then, the population was 17,000. By 2016, the population had increased to 19,000, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. The statistics bear out the higher likelihood of more traffic congestion and more safety concerns given the precarious state of the intersection burdened by a railroad crossing, train station, parking lot, church, fire station, and school. It is unimaginable that the city would permit another addition to a dangerous traffic intersection that it already knows exists. The Integrity Caucus's safety expert, Roy Luke, cited several traffic safety considerations for the proposed Waterway Lake Forest operation. Most important were detailed traffic concerns. They are on Appendix 2 of the brief that Mr. Sugar had sent to you. To pick a few, his concerns were inaccurate measures of the traffic gap, which supposedly will allow vehicles to exit from the station. 3, the dangers of the drivers trying to access westbound Everett Road upon exiting the car wash, whether from the Waukegan Road egress or the Everett Road egress. The admission from KLOA, Waterways consultant, that traffic stacking during rush hour is already at very undesirable levels, and that added traffic congestion from the site will add to the misery, with no solution proposed. The dangerous face-off between vehicles exiting from the car wash onto Everett Road at peak hours at the same time as vehicles are exiting from the church parking lot directly across the street at peak hours is a problem. The rate of vehicle collisions The rate of vehicle collisions leveled off immediately after the Amico and Pasquesi stores closed. The rate of collisions at the intersection has risen to pre-closing levels even with the parcel vacant, so that the rate of collisions will rise even higher if the site is occupied by an intense traffic feeder such as a waterway car wash. Remember, the city itself recognized the collision-prone dangers of the intersection in late 2014 and requested assistance to reduce those dangers, but assistance was never granted and no remedial efforts were ever undertaken. What's been proposed here tonight is that sometime down the road, some of this IDOT traffic situation will be addressed sometime down the road. That's just not an acceptable situation for the residences. If the waterway operation opens at the intersection, the additional congestion will surely raise the collision rate to a more severe level than it is now. If you don't mind,
Mr. Monroe, would you conclude your testimony, please?
Okay. As Mayor Lansing said in the summer of 2017 edition of the City Bulletin Dialogue, and as he repeated in the spring 2017 ward meetings, the city's first and foremost priority is enacting its strategic plan and annual budget is maintaining strong public safety and security. Permitting a waterway project is contrary to that particular priority and contrary to the strategic plan as well as the sustainability plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sugar? Following Mr. Sugar will be Janice Sugar.
My name is Richard Sugar. I live on Marlane. I want to spend some time talking about the actual ordinance and the special permit criteria. First of all, the waterway project does not meet the requirements for a drive-through facility because it creates safety hazards for pedestrians and vehicles. It adds to, as we've heard, it adds to congestion, it creates an accident-prone intersection, and it's about to get worse because of the opening of Mariano's, the new Lake Forest Hospital, the proposed side rail for Amtrak and rail traffic. Squeezing what should be a 2.5-acre operation into a 1.5-acre site is asking for confusion, driving errors, and flagrant violations of traffic law. Second, the project will substantially diminish and impair property values, as you've heard. Third, the project will interfere with the use and enjoyment of the property in the immediate vicinity, the neighbors, the church, the medical office building. The landlord in the medical office building will sit 20 feet from the car wash exit, disturbing the peace and quiet of the patients who are already injured and ill coming for treatment. It'll drive the medical offices out of that building, causing losses to the landlord. As you've heard, the project will interfere with St. Patrick's Church. I can't be quite as qualified to talk as the Monsignor, but I will let him speak for himself. Fourth, the ordinance requires an applicant to demonstrate that ingress and egress to and from the site will minimize traffic congestion. To the contrary, the already congested intersection with a busy thoroughfare, both north and south and east and west, facing the railroad tracks and the train station, facing the fire station, facing the church, will inevitably cause more congestion. There is no doubt about it. Just look at Northbrook. Fifth, the ordinance requires businesses located in a B1 district to accommodate the frequently recurring needs of persons residing in or adjacent to the residential areas. With 18 gas stations and 22 car washes within a 10-mile radius, it hardly seems that residents in that area need a waterway. We aren't opposed to light commercial development in a B1 district. That would be reasonable. Housing, retail stores, restaurants, a science museum, medical offices are all reasonable uses. But the use that Waterway intends to put to the site fails the special use permit conditions on so many levels. It should be denied.
Ms. Sugar? Following Ms. Sugar, we will take a 7-minute recess before we resume the public hearing. I would please direct you again, cease the clapping, please.
Hi, my name is Janice Sugar. I live at 1059 Marlene Drive. Oh, sorry. Okay. Now, imagine the irony. My husband, Richard Sugar, who has been preaching the dangers of the intersection of Everett and Waukegan Road, was himself hit by a car when walking to the train to go downtown to work on the morning of June 22nd, 2017. A hurried driver, frustrated with his long wait to turn onto Waukegan from eastbound Everett, accelerated through the intersection while Richard was in the crosswalk, swiping him, knocking him to the ground, breaking his glasses, cutting his chin, and bruising his knee and shoulder from the force of being thrown to the ground by the impact of the car. Thankfully, nothing was broken. Sorry. But Richard does have scars left over from the accident. The car never slowed down, never stopped, never looked back. Richard had to go to the urgent care center nearby to be bandaged up, and he couldn't go to work that day. The dangers that already exist at that intersection, just injecting even more congestion, will inevitably lead to more pedestrian injuries. God forbid it should be a student from St. Mary's School. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, at this time, we'll take a 7-minute recess. We will be back here at 8:30 sharp.
Well timed.
The meeting is hereby called back into order. All the members of the commissioners in attendance are here. So we'll call next, and the next registrant is Mary Ann Redding, and Mary Ann will be followed by Mary O'Donnell. Ms. Redding, are you here? Okay. And before we get started, too, please refrain from clapping and booing and hissing and that sort of thing. We want to get through this as quickly as we can. We've got 12 more registered, and I don't know how many more, and if we assume, who haven't signed out a slip, and if we assume 5 minutes per, that's another hour of public testimony. So, I'll stay here till 11 o'clock, which is the maximum time we can be here, but I'm not so sure the other commissioners feel that same sentiment. So, and the other thing I would ask is, if you've already prepared a written testimonies, don't repeat it. Summarize it, whatever. We've already seen it. We probably read it 2 or 3 times. I can identify when I heard I knew just where the document it came from. So we've read that stuff, I can assure you. Please proceed.
Good evening. My name is Mary Ann Redding. My address is 1541 Catherine Lane. I'm a 4th Ward Lake Forest Caucus member, and I'm also secretary of the Evergreen Homeowners Association, which lies directly east of the proposed car wash area. The Evergreen neighborhood consists of approximately 60 homes, averaging upward of $1.5 million to $3 million. When someone wants to build a new home in our neighborhood, it must first be approved by our homeowners association. And there are certain things that we keep in mind when making up our decision to approve a new home. One is we don't want something built that sticks out like a sore thumb or is unappealing aesthetically for our neighborhood. We look to make sure that it has the tasteful integrity of blending in with its surroundings and the other homes in the neighborhood and enhance the beauty of what is already present. With that said, we are all stewards of the land of Lake Forest while we live here. The Planning Commission is on the front line. The city has made its goals very clear in its 2017-2021 strategic plan and its July 2016 sustainability plan. How does an industrial scale, old school car wash, gas station convenience store meet the city's goals? The strategic plan says it's important, I quote, it's important to the city, this is short, it's important to the city that core values are adhered to, assuring that Lake Forest remains a desirable place to live, one that is welcoming to our younger families, professionals, as well as longtime residents, embracing diversity and changing local and state demographics. The strategic plan goes on to say that the city should continue the efforts to enhance the unique, friendly, and interesting business districts, adding new family-friendly businesses, more young adult-friendly restaurants and specialty stores that will continue to make the business district attractive places to shop and eat while continuing to build a sense of community. End of quote. This was on page 12. It doesn't sound like these goals are being met by Waterway. The sustainability plan observed that Lake Forest experiences its own severe traffic congestion, particularly on the weekday mornings and afternoons during the school year. One of the chief goals of the sustainability plan is to reduce traffic congestion. This was on page 17 and 18. Permitting a car wash, gas station, convenience store at one of the already most congested intersections in the city would directly contradict your mandates of the strategic plan and sustainability plan. Given the emerging trends of self-driving cars, ride-sharing, electric cars, waterless car washing, dirt-repelling materials, as well as millennials viewing cars as economic balls and chains, the future viability of Waterway Project is doomed. It is 20th century commerce in a 21st century world. Gas stations and car washes will go by the way of horse and buggies and newspapers, magazines, and Borders bookstores. In conclusion, I ask you 2 questions. Is this really the best we can do for such an important cornerstone of Lake Forest? And number 2, is this car wash in keeping with the aesthetic integrity of that area, our beautiful city of Lake Forest? Thank you.
Thank you. Mary O'Donnell. Following Mary will be Joe Pasolino.
My name is Mary O'Donnell, and I live at 1184 Lynette Lane. I want to address the potential traffic runoff onto Marlane Drive, the church parking lot. There is a high probability that with the increased congestion at the Waukegan-Everett intersection as a result of the waterway operation, frustrated drivers traveling on Everett will venture into the Lake Forest Chateau neighborhood as a short exit cut to reach Waukegan Road. The roads in the Lake Forest Chateau neighborhood are not built to accommodate such heavy traffic flow, are narrower than a standard city street, and have no street lights. Moreover, with curving streets, no sidewalks, and no street lights, the additional unwarranted traffic poses real safety hazards to pedestrians from Lake Forest Chateaus and the villas who enjoy an outdoor walk or routinely walk their dogs on Marlane Drive. In addition, it is likely that the increased frustration with congestion will cause drivers exiting the waterway onto Everett to enter the St. Patrick's parking lot in order to perform a U-turn and proceed westbound onto Everett toward Waukegan. Such behavior trespasses onto church property and more dangerously interferes with the flow of traffic at peak pickup and drop-off hours at St. Mary's School and peak church service hours. The Waterway Project does not minimize traffic congestion on public streets, but instead severely aggravates traffic congestion. It fails the special use permit. Thank you.
Mr. Pasolino, then followed by Richard Adler.
Good evening. My name is Joe Pasolino. I live at 631 West Everett, about a half a mile to the east of the intersection. I'm talking on a couple of points here today. We did hear quite a bit of testimony regarding the noise levels, and I just want to say a couple of things. First, I think it should be emphasized that in Mr. Schomer's, or Dr. Schomer's report, that for 4.5 hours he was there, they never shut the door once. Now, also, I think we heard testimony from the proponents here about these doors, these special doors, but it's theoretical whether they're going to actually work or not. There has never been really a test on it, as far as I know. Secondly, as far as the rectory and the church across the street, not to mention the school right down the road, I take that every day. I come from my house, I take that intersection, and I go north to my work. And I'm a real estate developer, so I'm not opposed to development, generally speaking, and I've had to go in front of these boards in their shoes many times. But I will say that this is definitely what I would consider a high-risk, low-reward situation for the city, this type of use. We've heard testimony about buggy whips, et cetera, and so forth. I mean, I believe that could be the case eventually, but that's not our problem here. But I will say that property values in the neighboring places will be affected. I've been charged to finish the Lake Forest Chateau project on behalf of my father, who built those buildings right across the street and to the east of the proposed project. And 1036 and 1034 are right next to it, and 1032 and 1034 are the closest to it. We've had trouble even selling those to begin with, and this is not going to make it easier. And we have to build another 6 units there, and this is not going to be an easy sell if that goes in with the proposed levels of traffic, noise, and pollution that are going to come from it, and lighting in addition. And I also believe that we've heard a lot of testimony. I'm not as eloquent as Monsignor Dempsey, but he basically told you can have any expert in the world tell you one thing or another, but you've got to use your own senses and your own common sense on this, and I believe that has to be done. Then, for example, I don't think that they've addressed anything regarding the gentleman who owns the medical facility next door, the old Kendler building. As far as the noise there, he is 20 feet from their exit. I went to Waterway on Monday, and I had my car washed. It was a credible car wash, but it was very, very noisy. I spent about a half hour walking around the entire building. And unlike this site, first of all, it's next to a commercial area. The exit of the car wash faces REI and a bunch and CVS, et cetera, right directly to the south. So it's definitely, and it's about 2-3 times bigger site as well. Okay, this is a small thing. As Richard Sugar said, you're basically trying to squeeze a 3-acre operation in a 1.4 acre site. Also, as far as the IDOT and the traffic circulation, we know that right across the street is the rectory and the little church. Every day they have 8 o'clock mass. They have weddings and funerals regularly there. You've got the school right to the east. Tremendous traffic, especially in the morning there with the mothers dropping off their kids. You're just going to exacerbate this tremendously there, and you're going to end up having more accidents. There's no doubt about that, and that's the least of it. And as the lady just alluded to today, if you allow a right turn lane out onto Everett Road going eastbound, which I believe is proposed, I believe there's a 3/4 entrance there where you have 2 coming in eastbound and then 1 going out eastbound. They are definitely going to cut through Marlene, and Marlene is not set up for that. That was not the idea when we built that. It was to be built as a buffer between the commercial to the east along Waukegan Road, Lake Forest Chateau I'm talking about, and the residential to the east of there, okay? My father had to actually go to the 2nd District Court of Appeals to actually overturn the city because they denied him at the time. But then the second, in the case that I actually read in law school, said an 8-page opinion, and they were scathing against the city, said they had no business to deny him at that time because it was a great buffer. I do not believe that this, for example, this type of a use is any type of a buffer whatsoever between residential immediately to the north and to the east and the commercial district. In addition to that, I don't know if IDOT's, I believe that's still up in the air on the entranceway. Am I mistaken, Kathy? That's not been finalized yet with IDOT on the entrances and exits, egress? But in any event, a few years ago, I have a property on 45. Make a long story short, they were going to 4 lanes. I wanted to get a left turn lane. I was about 3 times further away from the intersection as this place, and they made me do a right turn, right out only. They wouldn't let me, even though I had room for 5 stacking cars. This, you're not even proposing a left turn lane. I'm not sure how they are going to approve this to even get in there and without a left turn lane at all, being especially so close. They told me their policy was that we are too close to an intersection. We have to have a right in and right out only, not a full. And if they do get this full intersection here to the south where the Pasquesi was, why? And they also, I think, alluded to the fact that they've redesigned it to have an internal where the cars come out of the car wash and they can take a left and come back out on the Waukegan Road and get out in and out that way. Then why do we need any type of entrance, egress, or ingress onto Everett Road? That is a major, major flaw. And if they do get the IDOT, the full intersection, egress, the south part of the property, and they get the partial one to the north, there is absolutely no reason to have any egress or ingress onto Everett Road.
Thank you, Mr. Bessel.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Adler. Following him will be first initial W and name is Wade, W-A-D-E. Oh, you're Mr. Adler?
I think Mr. Wade, that's Mr. Wade.
Okay. Mr. Adler? Okay, apparently Mr. Adler isn't here. Sam Halleck? Mr. Halleck here? Following him will be Dr. Bruce Bach.
Thank you for allowing me to speak to you guys. I don't think of you and us as separate. We're on the same team. We want what's best for the city of Lake Forest, and Lake Forest is one of the more distinguished communities on the North Shore, and that's because of you don't allow any just usage to come in town. I appreciate that. I'm a long-time resident of Lake Forest, and I don't live far from Everett and Waukegan intersection. I do have a
Sir, could you speak into the mic, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling my attention to that. I'm a long-term resident of Lake Forest. I do not live too far from the intersection of Everett and Waukegan Road. I'm deeply troubled by the proposal because it's a gas station, a car wash is not the best usage of the parcel. I owned and operated several car washes in Lake County, and it's just most communities, if not all of the communities in Lake County, including unincorporated Lake County, they do not allow just a car wash to go in any place. They have to go through the process of special use permit. There's a reason for that. They want to have control as to how it's done and also for the location. I'm not sure that the Everett intersection and Waukegan Road is the right location for that. A car wash needs space to maneuver, and it just the site is too tight. In the winter time, they can't help it. The cars, as they leave to the public roads, they're going to be shedding some water, and with the water and the cold temperature, there's going to be some freezing and slippery. The roads are going to be more slippery. That intersection is already dangerous. So basically, what we're doing, we're adding fuel to the fire. Let's talk about the certain things. I know the developer is talking about recycling, and the water that goes down the drain, it goes into a holding tank, and they're only going to be able to recycle the water off the top. The bottom part of there's a lot of sediment that's going to go down to the bottom in a holding tank, and that's going to be contaminated. It's going to have mud, sand, gasoline, grease, you name it. And that, by the way, periodically they have to have a licensed hauler come over and take the toxic stuff out. And they cannot just take it to any old landfill. It has to go to a designated landfill that would accept toxic material. So that to me sounds like more like industrial use rather than commercial use. As far as recycling, in my opinion, it doesn't work. I've been there, done that. Like 12, 15 years ago, we put in a recycling system, and it didn't work. The quality of the water was poor. We had to take them out. But each is their own. If they think they can get the car cleaned that way, that's fine. That's basically what I have to say. Thank you for doing a fine job. And I just want you, when you decide on this thing, to ask yourself a question. Is that the car wash going to enhance that intersection? Or is it going to make it worse and more dangerous? And I trust your judgment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Bach will be followed by Bridget Stein.
Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, thank you for your service. Thank you for being here to listen to your neighbors who live in Lake Forest. My name is Bruce Bach. I was born in this city more than 65 years ago. I have not lived here my entire life, but I'm a 1970 graduate of Lake Forest High School. So I have at least 50 years of observation of what goes on in the traffic in the community of West Lake Forest. I live at 481 Wilshire, which is within a half a mile of the facility which is being proposed. Let me suggest, since you have asked that we give, if you will, non-written testimony, that what we've heard tonight is a good example of meretricious measurement. I'm a scientist and a physician and a cancer researcher. I will tell you that the acoustic measurements that we have heard tonight were absolutely nonsense. Amplitude and intensity are important features. The concept that a car wash will not increase the amplitude of ambient sound is not on its face even credible. Consider that. Second of all, I would ask you to consider 3 points on the compass: Stockholm, Los Angeles, Lake Forest, and Chicago. Why those points? If you visit Stockholm, it is a beautiful city, an organic city, a city that works. Why? Because the residents of Stockholm for 300 years have practiced town planning which listens to the voice of the 500 people who have signed a petition against this abuse of land and space and our most important resource, which is our Commonwealth. This disturbs the peace. It is a high-intensity industrial use being dropped on one of the most busy intersections in the entire city. It strains credulity when you have 10 pumps and you're talking about 25 cars an hour minimum. What's the economics of this? This is a high-intensity use. I would ask you to say, in your capacity as commissioners, just use common sense. If you can't recognize a nuisance, then read the data carefully. The people of Lake Forest do not want this facility. Simply say no. Thank you very much.
Following Ms. Stein will be Mike Mulqueen.
Hi, I'm Bridget Stein. I've lived in Lake Forest since I was born, and I do remember the old Amoco, and I do remember how convenient it was living so close. But now that I've heard a lot of people talking, I do understand that it is not it's not going to be a very safe area to put a gas station plus a car wash. Because of the the church and the school. So now I have actually changed my mind. Like I said, listening to everybody's I guess you say I don't know what the word is. Reasoning for not having the gas station where they're wanting to put it. So, but I do understand now all the reasons why the gas station should not be where they want it to be put it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mulqueen. Following him will be Ellen Seidel.
Commissioners, I'll try to make this short. It's a long night. My name is Mike Mulqueen. I live at 1038 Marlane Drive. I live 15 to 20 feet from the southern boundary of this waterway project. Okay. From the financial aspect, Waterway kind of misleads the city by boasting about the sales tax revenue likely to be contributed to the city in its future operations. Left unsaid is the depreciation in the tax base of the property surrounding the Waterway project because of a negative impact it has on property values. The negative impact will be felt in lowered real estate tax revenues from surrounding properties for as long as that car wash is around. Okay? According to the city's fiscal year 2018 general budget, you expect to get 8% of the revenue is derived from the sales tax, and 53% is derived from property taxes. The city is far more reliant on property taxes to meet its expenditures. I don't think it's fiscally responsible for the city to approve the waterway project and diminish the largest reliable source of revenue. Besides, waterway takes money from the pockets of Lake Forest residents and sends it to St. Louis. Doesn't stay here. And you ask the question, and what Lake Forest residents will receive payroll benefits? As has been mentioned before, in the March meeting here, and a couple of folks have mentioned it already, that in 1990 and 91, the Amoco station, formerly on the subject site, petitioned for installation of a car wash on the northern half of the subject site. The petition was unsuccessful, and no car wash was installed. Traffic congestion was of significant concern. The applicant's car wash is much more intrusive than the rejected Amoco car wash. The applicant's project spills over into the southern part of the site, previously the garden center, and abuts single-family and multifamily residents, unlike the rejected Amoco car wash. If the Amoco car wash was unsuitable for the site, clearly a larger and more intrusive project, which includes a noisy car wash and the much higher public safety risks of collisions, cannot now be approved. And lastly, I certainly agree with the city engineer, and it's been said before, that going south on Waukegan Road and making a left-hand turn into that car wash, there's no left-hand turn lane. So that's a collision, a rear-ender waiting to happen. It's a very dangerous situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Seidel, are you still here? Yes. Following him will be Gretchen Seidel.
Yes, my name is Alan Seidel. I've lived in Westlake Forest for 34 years, and I would like to set the record straight with regard to a statement made by one of the representatives of Waterway Gas. At a previous meeting, that individual stated that Waterway had the full support of Sunset Foods. And I spoke with John Cortese, owner of Sunset Foods, and he advised me that he wrote a letter to the board or to the city adamantly opposing this petitioner's desire to build a car wash. I'd just like to make that clear, that it was stated that they were in support, and being a major commercial operation in Lake Forest, Sunset Foods has been respected.
We have a letter from him supporting it.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Have you received it?
Yes, we did.
Okay, you acknowledge that?
New letter.
Okay.
You're confused.
New letter.
They support it.
Well,
No.
there's a subsequent letter.
There is a subsequent letter,
Or
yes.
Given, well.
I'm sorry.
I'll find it. but
Please proceed.
Where I believe he became more neutral.
Okay, I spoke with him today, and he said he was opposed. I just wanted to set the record straight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Seidel?
Good evening. Always enjoy speaking to you all Wednesday every several months.
Could you speak into the mic, please?
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. I'm Gretchen Seidel. I live at 11 Waukegan, which is just south of the proposed property, or proposed business. And I will try not to bring up anything that's already been discussed, as I know you do not care for that. First point I'd like to make is that we keep talking about this waterway car wash in comparison to the waterway at Northbrook, and that doesn't seem to be an appropriate comparison to me. That's like apples to oranges in that that's a much larger facility, and in an area that's much different to where this proposed site is. What seems to be a better comparison is this proposed car wash to the car wash in East Lake Forest, the car spa on Western Avenue. It's, first of all, in Lake Forest, as this should be. It's also somewhat an entrance to the commercial district. Entering from Western Avenue, you get to the business district of East Lake Forest, much like we've been talking about. This will be the entrance to West Lake Forest and the business district. The hours that were proposed for the Everett and Waukegan has been something that's been a problem for the residents, as Commissioner Freeman also brought up. You know, when you talk about after 7 p.m., only 5 or so cars coming through, and then, you know, you're not willing to budge on those hours except for maybe 30 minutes. To me, that's a strong indicator that this is not something that's for the neighborhood and for the residents, that it's actually an indicator that it's for outside people. And then right there, we're not talking about something that's relevant for a B1 business permit. No one's also talked about the noise from the stack of cars that'll be lined up waiting to use the car wash and or the gas pumps. Anyone that's been out walking or even just walked from your car to the grocery store or anywhere, you know that today you can hear people's radios, you can hear people's cell phone conversations from Bluetooth. There is ambient noise. I don't know what the dB levels are or what, you know, the sound people would call that, but you can hear inside of people's cars these days. So for those that live at 1111 or at 1032, 1034, whatever, Mar Lane, we're going to be exposed to not only the car wash noise, but the line from the stack as well. And that's not something that we wish to hear. Thirdly, the hours mentioned as at-home hours, it's not accurate for today's day and age. You know, we don't get home at 7 p.m. anymore. Today, more people are working from home than ever before. I mean, raise your hand if you're at home during the day. We also have a lot of people who are retired, retirement age in Lake Forest. We got a lot of retired people. We also have, you know, people who have young kids who stay at home. So the idea that we don't get home until 7 p.m. and that's when we should shut down the car wash is nonsense to me. So those are a couple points I wanted to bring up. I also wanted to bring up litter. We want to have a convenience store. Well, that's great. You know, Mariano's has just opened. Sunset is up their game. We as Lake Forest residents have access to quick food. The people that are going to use the convenience store, the people that are going to use the gas, because you have stated that your gas prices will not be competitive with Costco and the existing places, those people are going to be the workers and so on and so forth passing through. Then they will grab their lunch or whatever and out of your convenience store, and they are going to drop litter. Now, you do have an army of people that will work on your site, so you will not have litter on your site. That will be fantastic. I appreciate that. However, a block or two or a mile down the road, Lake Forest is going to have additional litter from your convenience store. How do I know this? Because I live on Waukegan and Everett. And guess what kind of litter I see? McDonald's from the Heinens, McDonald's over there. I see Chick-fil-A litter. I see all kind of litter from people who take it from other places. So litter is another issue that no one has brought up yet. So while a lot of us have stated we are not against light commercial business use, we are against waterway car wash at this site. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. We're at the point where we are through the list of people who registered in writing. Are there others here who wish to address the commission on this issue? Yes, please come forward. And please provide your name and address too, please.
Hello, my name is Lane Booter. I live on West Everett Road, and here are the things I'm kind of curious about. This is the first of the 3 meetings I've attended. I realize that the owners of the property want to probably get rid of it, sell it, get it a new purpose. I realize that Waterway desires to plop a business down here, granted, but I haven't heard one thing about a feasibility study. Every single one of us goes somewhere else to get our cars washed or washes them themselves, gets their gas elsewhere. We're all doing just fine without that facility being there. So I just haven't heard anything about a feasibility study, how many people would be going through that operation on a daily basis. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Others who wish to address the commission? Yes, please come forward.
Wow, this is the second time I'm addressing the public in 19 years. My name is Lisa Meanville. I'm at 701 West Old Elm. I've lived in Lake Forest for 19 years. And to the previous speaker's point, and it isn't really my market interest in it, I don't know how to make it feasible when we have 2 Buc-ee's down the street, that's a car wash, and gas station, which is on 41. We have another car wash on 41. We have Buc-ee's down Old Elm, which has a car wash. And we have Costco in a very small area of maybe less than 1.5 miles, 2 miles. On the issue of the traffic, which does concern me, and it concerns me for one reason, in addition to all the myriad of reasons I've heard about the church and the community very close by, is the students. And no one has looked at how the traffic is going to go past the students, and in this case, not of St. Mary's, but in an effort to get to either Half Day Road or Waukegan. Guess what road they're going to end up taking? Telegraph. And what is on Telegraph? Everett Road. Now, I don't know how many of you have had children who've gone to Everett, but I have. And my children came from Old Elm on to Everett, and I will tell you, it is nothing but constant danger crossing that road over Waukegan to get over to Telegraph. And in fact, it was such a danger that when my children first started there, they were able to get some sort of compensation if I drove them rather than them crossing the street at Waukegan over the railroad tracks to get to Everett, which I thought was a very walkable thing. I actually found out from the state of Illinois that they were willing to compensate me for it. I didn't happen to put them on a bus. Now that puts another question. Then not only will people go from the gas station to Marlene, but the next step is going to be Evergreen. And to Evergreen, you have a great many families that live there with children waiting for buses. Another danger, because when they want to get out of the gas station, they're going to be going fast. And I do remember this because of the Amoco, which later became a British Petroleum. That did happen on occasion. And they only had a small convenience store and, if I'm not mistaken, 4 pumps. So this is another danger. So my request would be that, first of all, it not be built. But second of all, the danger to, it's just not a short-term danger of those surrounding that area, but where are people going to be just driving out of there and trying to zip across the tracks, find a shorter cut to either 294 or down to Waukegan. It's going through neighborhoods and other schools. It's just not St. Mary's. It's just not the church. You're looking at Everett School, and that is a danger. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sir?
My name is Rudy Schwartz.
I live on 1036 Marlene Drive, about 20 feet from the car wash going to be. So I'm really affected by that. I will smell it. I will hear it. I will look at it, because it's a two-story house. So I will look at it. I know what's there now. It's just a piece of junk. But I rather look at a piece of junk than listening to a car wash every day. So if we can't come, or not we, but you and the community can come to an idea to put something else there, which will pay everybody and everybody benefits, that would be an ideal situation. And perhaps it's just the one time that we have to look around. Another thing is, I read just recently, when the boom ended, a lot of car washes went belly up because they were financed privately. And a lot of people lost a lot of money through car washes. And that's another thing we have to consider. If anything happened in the economy, they are out of here. If they financed it, they're out of here unless they get the money back. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you. Next speaker, please come forward.
Good evening. Hi. My name is Dave Heckler. My wife and I live at 1066 Franz Drive. We moved here about 3 years ago. We are across the pond from our neighbors who back up immediately to the proposed site, like the gentleman that just spoke. We are very concerned about noise and light pollution that we would experience at our house across the pond, in addition to the serious congestion and safety problems. I grew up in Northbrook. I spent a lot of time commuting up and down Waukegan Road growing up. I always liked the feel, the quiet nature as you entered into Lake Forest on Waukegan. Back then it was cornfields and the church and Calico Corners. Nice and quiet. Fast forward 25 years, I'm back in the area, raised a family in Winnetka. My parents live in Lake Bluff. I'm back on Waukegan Road, traveling there, and I was very impressed with that quiet nature of Waukegan Road was maintained. The developments at Sunset Corners and Settler Square, very tastefully done. For that reason, my wife and I specifically looked in West Lake Forest for that next phase in our lives. A large-scale car wash is a poor choice for the southern gateway to Lake Forest. Do we really want to have a massive car wash, gas station, and mini mart as the first thing that a traveler sees when they enter Lake Forest on Waukegan Road or when they step off the train at Telegraph? Is that going to attract the next wave of millennial homeowners? We have a historical and architectural gem at St. Patrick's, immediately across the street. You have heard clearly from the Monsignor that he doesn't want it for himself or for his parishioners. Putting a large-scale car wash across the street would be a true eyesore. Final point I'd like to make is the way Waterway does business, and that is to approach each and every patron for fuel while standing at the pump and press them to buy multiple packages of car washes. I've experienced that personally. Quoting a section of an article that was in the October 20th, 2015 Northbrook Star, shortly after Waterway in Northbrook opened, the company has hired 38 of a total of 80 expected before the end of the year, officials said. A dozen of those 38 are transplants from the St. Louis area, where the company is headquartered, said Sean Nordgarden, Vice President, Regional Managing Partner. The reason so many old hands are necessary, he said, is because of the way the company operates. When a new customer comes in for gas, an employee talks to them about the company's car wash deals. They may not have come there for a car wash, but they're getting talked to. Further on the quote, "It's not easy to do with grace, especially when business is slow," noted Jennifer Miller, a Lake County resident working her first shift ever. "I feel like a vulture," she said, laughing. It would be a poor reflection and very unbecoming to Lake Forest to allow a massive scale car wash and a company with heavy-handed sales tactics in our otherwise genteel and welcoming community. Approving the Waterway project will lower property values in the immediate area repel future patrons, residents, and visitors to the city and to the Waukegan Road Business District. Thank you.
Thank you. Raise your hand if you'd like to address us. Seeing none, we will proceed to the agenda. And that is to get final questions from commissioners to petitioner or to staff. I'm sorry?
Does the petitioner and the staff get a response first? That might cover our questions.
That's typically after.
Oh, okay.
Well, let's see here. I don't see that here. Oh, petitioner rebuttal comes number 10.
Okay.
After our final questions.
No questions.
Anybody? No questions?
Just a quick question for Mr. Goldman. If your petition is successful, I checked the car wash hours at the BP station on Western Avenue in East Lake Forest, and their hours are Monday through Saturday, 8 to 6, Sunday, 9 to 3. Their gas station is Monday through Friday, 6 to 9, and they have shortened hours on the weekend, Saturday, 7 to 6, Sunday, 8 to 5. If your petition is successful, would you be willing to consider hours closer to those used by the Western Avenue car wash?
Those hours are short, especially on Sundays, and that's an important time for our customers to be able to come. Would we consider the breadth of different options? Absolutely. Do we have some flex? Of course we do. But I don't want to say that we're going to close at 3 o'clock on a Sunday, because we certainly couldn't do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I have no further questions. Lou? Okay. Okay. Petitioner rebuttal to what you heard from the public hearing, or comments or questions from the commissioners.
I don't think I want to frame it so much as a rebuttal as just a few points I would like to make. Then I'm going to ask Henry Dubinsky, who founded Waterway, to speak, and then Sandy Stewart, who owns the property. Couple of things I just want to point out. We have there are some thoughts that the neighbor in the building next door was going to have issues with us. We have a letter agreement with him where he's on board with our proposal. Happy to provide that to you all.
We have it.
You have it? Oh,
Yes.
Good. Very good. And it's a tricky thing because people are passionate about this, and I'm trying to take the passion out of it from our point of view. We understand how important your backyard is to you. I understand how important my backyard is to me. What I think we need to, what we tried to show using our experts, and I think we showed pretty well, is that this is a good use. This is a use that fits in the site. There have been remarks that this is too small. This will be one of the largest sites we have in the company. The site in Northbrook has many services we don't have here and we aren't offering here. So it's hard to draw those comparisons. And then again, on the noise, the untested doors. That door has been tested and used for quite a while. It just is not an untested door. It's a technology that's been used for quite a while. Again, we've got some flex on the hours. I understand the sensitivity to that, but obviously, we'd have to look a little more closely, and I don't think we can shrink them. I'm not going to tell you I'm comfortable shrinking them as much as the East Lake Forest Car Wash. When it's all said and done, though, we think we've presented the best option and the best car wash we have ever presented in any community, right here in Lake Forest. We are doing more for sound than we've ever done, and you all pushed us and we got great ideas, and that's why we did it. And we listened, and we reacted. So I'm going to ask Henry Dubinsky to speak for a moment, and then Mr. Stewart.
Good evening. Thank you for listening for so long. I'm Henry Dubinsky, founder and chairman of Waterway. We've appreciated the opportunity to work with the city staff to make the many changes shown in tonight's presentation. We at Waterway hope to be a good neighbor and contributor to the Lake Forest community, just as we have for 47 years in communities in 5 states around the country. When we make a promise to a community, we keep it. We are prepared to make a substantial investment in your community, and as always, we will be a valuable service provider, a responsible corporate citizen, and actively support the Lake Forest community. Now I'll turn the floor over to Sandy Stewart, who would like to make a few remarks.
Good evening. I'm Sandy Stewart. I'm the manager of IP Properties, the owner of the site under discussion tonight. There's been a lot of passion here. There's been a lot of assertions and counter-assertions, but as you begin your deliberations, I just want to leave you with a couple of concluding thoughts. As I learned leading the development of Conway Farms, although it may take more time than originally anticipated, this process works. You know, your direction, along with the constructive guidance from city staff, has made this a better petition than the one you first saw. We also listened carefully to the neighbors, and the plan has been further improved because of their feedback. The proposed development is consistent with the city's economic goals. It will generate sales tax and property tax, and will provide jobs in our community. Now, this site has long been zoned commercial, as Nick showed you in his presentation, but it's been a non-productive asset for many years. Since we bought the site in 2011, we heard from various brokers and developers, but none presented a project of the quality that we felt appropriate for the community. Now we have a creative, experienced developer who's prepared to invest substantial sums to make this site productive and to serve a real community need. Finally, we do believe that our proposed development meets the criteria for the special use permit as defined in city zoning ordinances and as noted in the staff report tonight. So for all those reasons, I would urge that you look favorably upon this petition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Okay. We've been presented with a staff report that goes through all of the background and so forth, but to frame the discussion and debate and action on this, I would ask the commission whether or not, and especially in light of the fact that at least on one of the special use criteria, Kathy says that this criterion requires further deliberation by the commission. Does the commission want to go through each of these 6 and agree or disagree?
Chairman Lee, it's the 3rd meeting. I would like to hear comment from each member of the commission. I know Mr. Henry's made some views known, as have I in prior meetings. Each of us may have different issues, different questions, and I'd like to hear from the other commission members before we get into those specifics, if you wouldn't mind.
May I make just 2 quick comments? First, does the staff have any response to what we've heard thus far? And then, can we close the public meeting now, the public comment section of the meeting, and then we can have our deliberations, Chairman?
Yes. Consider the public hearing closed, or declare it closed. And from this point forward, the discussion will only be between commissioners and staff. Staff, in the event that she may want motions clarified, so that's the give and take. There will be no further opportunities for for public to speak on this, and we would appreciate your not asking. Okay? Okay. Lou, you're the junior member. Please proceed.
Well, did Kathy have any
Oh, I'm
comments
sorry.
first?
Kathy?
Thank you, Chairman Lay, members of the commission. Just a few comments and clarifications. Your job is difficult. You are balancing various interests, but you are charged with evaluating this petition specifically on the criteria. You heard some comments about sales tax revenues. That is the purview of the City Council. Exhibit A to the staff report details the applicable criteria, and staff has presented findings stating that a number of those criteria appear to be clearly met. There are a couple of those criteria that we really are asking for further deliberation from the commission based on what you heard tonight, based on the correspondence you received, based on the expert's testimony, and based on the petitioner's presentation. Just a couple things to clarify. One, staff has been in contact with Northbrook Village officials, and what we heard from Northbrook, at least from the city official standpoint, is that Waterway delivered on its promises, both from an architectural perspective, overall design of the site, and from the perspective of what they said sound levels would be. Northbrook officials also said that they found that the automatic door, which in Northbrook is at the entrance, to be extremely effective, to use their words. Their regret is that they did not request a door at the exit, even though the exit is toward commercial uses. Northbrook officials also said that the site is well managed and clean. So I just offer that as, city official to city official. That's what we heard from Northbrook. I know there was one comment about the access onto Everett Road was not needed. It is my understanding, and I will be corrected by the traffic engineers if I am inaccurate, but it is my understanding that IDOT actually is requiring an access onto Everett Road. They will not allow the only ingress and egress from this property to be from Waukegan Road. It is likely that whatever the use of this property is in the long term, that the issue of left turns into the site will probably never go away. It again is a difficult parcel because of how it's configured and because of its location so close to the intersection. And just final comments, the property is zoned for commercial use. You've heard numerous times, and many of you know firsthand that it has a long history of being used for gas station, service station. In the 90s, when the car wash proposal from the gas station was denied, the discussion was just about the northern portion of the property. The situation at that time probably took into account the fact that Pasquazzi's was located on the southern portion of the site, and that use itself generated a significant amount of property. So the simple decision, or the decision at that time to deny the car wash simply can't be translated into the basis for a no today, because you are obligated to consider the different surroundings and the different conditions meeting the site. Two final comments. One, the city frequently continues to receive concerns and complaints from residents about an eyesore at the entrance to the city's business district. We frequently receive calls, why isn't this site developed? We also receive many suggestions that a gas station would be appropriate at this location. That concludes my comments.
Please listen. We've listened to you. Thank you.
Kathy, would you address the question raised about a feasibility study, please?
A feasibility study for the business itself?
That was raised by the public.
My expectation is that Waterway probably would not be in front of us if they had not done. The city certainly doesn't do a feasibility study for individual businesses. We do rely on the businesses to do that. One thought for a condition in response to some of the concerns raised, if you choose to recommend in support of this, there could be a condition that requires that if one or more aspects of the business is closed, cease to operate because we are no longer driving cars or whatever the reason might be, that within a certain time period after the business has closed, all facilities associated with that aspect of the businesses would need to be removed. So we wouldn't be stuck with a car wash tunnel that was no longer operating. So just a suggestion.
John, Commissioner Kerr? Yes. As we look at the criterion laid out in the ordinance, there's been some discussion about a drive-through. Those are not the considerations for this particular special use, right? We're looking at the special use in the ordinance with these being two provided uses in the appendix to the ordinance.
Correct. The gas station and the car wash uses are specifically called out in the list of special uses for the B1 district. This is not considered a drive-through.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go by Senior. Go you first.
Could I ask, since we're hearing from each commissioner, I think what would be helpful to me as we work toward a motion is if there are certain aspects, conditions that would make the project feasible for the commissioners, that we talk about those. And we don't have to take a position whether you're yay or nay on the overall petition. I just think it would be helpful for us to hear, are there certain conditions that are more meaningful than others? That's all. All right. Thank you. Sorry.
Fair enough. That was small for everybody else.
To me, I'll say that there's two issues here that really need some closer examination and discussion. That's the traffic and the sound, which is pretty obvious to everyone. We don't have any established standards on sound, and that may be by design. So we're going off of our experts saying that it's an average, and that's considered standard practice. I agree that we need to use some common sense here as well. So it makes it really difficult to kind of really objectively review the sound issue. It really kind of there's some objectivity to it, but it really comes down to being subjective because we don't have any criteria to measure it against. I think the sound is a real issue. I think the petitioner has done a tremendous job to try to mitigate the sound issue, but it's not going to go away. And you've got some really close constituents that are going to be impacted by it, and there's no question about it. So that's an issue for me, and it's hard to get past that because I don't know if there's an easy solution or if there's any solution. Regarding the traffic, I think the concerns about the traffic are valid, but I don't think they're enough to prevent approval of the project. I'm very familiar with this property. I proposed a development on this property several years ago. We worked through this very same issues, access onto Waukegan Road, and we had the traffic studies. We had all of the work done with our engineer and with IDOT, and it was a satisfactory resolution. Unfortunately, the project didn't go forward. Otherwise, you'd see a Walgreens there right now. So I don't think the traffic is as much of an issue with me. So it really kind of boils down to one thing, and that's the sound thing, and I don't have an easy answer to that one.
Monica?
I mean, I almost have to echo Commissioner Pickus's comments. The traffic, I feel, is something that yes. I'm sorry. I'm agreeing mostly with Commissioner Pickus about what issues I see as part of this problem, this petition, is the traffic and the sound. The traffic, I think there's enough data that we have in our packets and information from IDOT that we can discuss it reasonably. The sound is something with all these different engineers coming in with the different numbers and software and calculations. I would like to have more feedback from everybody as to their opinions on the building and what we can do to help the residents.
Mike?
Okay, so first on the need portion of it, I would just, as I asked earlier today, put into the record that our neighbors to the west in Meadowalk have approved an expansion of the Costco gas services provided at that location. So for anybody who goes there and you sit 6 cars deep in the line to argue that we don't need a gas station on the west side of Lake Forest, I'm struggling with it. I struggle more, although I know it's not the purview of this commission, when I look at the parking lot and the fact that our neighbors to the west operate their city government on a surplus, and we are struggling with real financial issues here in the city of Lake Forest. So I don't struggle too hard with the need. So the other thing I would say as it relates to some of the public comments, first of all, it's great that we have experts on both sides. I mean, I think there's a lot of great work that's been done. Appreciate the commentary. Appreciate the issues that have been raised. I think it's like everyone else has said, and we said when it was very first presented 2 years ago, it does come down mostly to the noise issue, I think. I mean, because the idea that that IDOT would close traffic to an entire portion of a commercial property, I mean, that's essentially a taking of the land. So they're not going to do that. And I don't think, as we've said many times at these meetings, we are in the business of picking winners and losers on property. We have to allow the properties to be developed in a way that's consistent with the city plan and the code, and we can't allow winners or losers, because what happens, as we've been reminded tonight, the reason that multifamily dwelling, the chateau, is the way it is because the city denied it and it was litigated, and now we have what we have there. So, right, so that's what happens when you try and pick winners and losers on property values. One of the property owners appeals it. And I would say it's important for us, we're stewards of all of the resources of Lake Forest. It's important for us to remember that. It was pointed out in the public testimony tonight. And while we've been debating this for the last 2 years, I submitted also for the record that another gas station where the commission, county board, rejected the proposal. That proposal had 700 neighbors signing an opposing petition, and the court reversed it. When we were here last, we talked about a different proposal that also required a special use permit involving the McDonald's that no longer exists in our community. And we had a historical perspective of the extensive cost to the city in litigating that matter, only to end up with McDonald's that the city then, at least a large number of the residents, were disappointed to lose in the end. So we have to look at the city as a whole. We have to apply the ordinance that's in a way that's fair to all of the residents. It doesn't mean that I don't have concerns about the noise. I think it is an appropriate use. It's clearly called out as an appropriate use in the ordinance. We've heard a lot of testimony and quite I guess you'd call it, to be kind, passionately, in these hearings, that even a gas station isn't appropriate for this space. And I just think we have to be reasonable. We have to be reasonable. And it took Mattawa weeks to approve an extension and get those additional gas stations in there. And while they move forward, we will debate. And I think we have to, be thoughtful about that for all of the residents. So, how do you mitigate the noise? So we're fortunate to have experts, like I said, on both sides. I think a reduction in the hours is a reasonable condition to add. I think the additional sound barriers that they've talked about, I think some form of a restriction on the level of ambient noise, the level of noise. The petitioner has said that they would only go 2 decibels higher. I say we hold them to that. I would say that before they're allowed to get a permit, they have to have testing done at the city's choosing. City chooses the expert, Waterway pays for it, and they don't get a permit until it proves that it meets those requirements. We can put other limitations on it. We can put limitations about not just that there's speed doors at each exit, but they've said that it'll close more than 2/3 of the time. We can put that condition in there. We can put conditions in there about replacing windows at the church rectory. They've already agreed to replace the windows on the neighboring commercial property. We can have a process by which grievances can be raised about noise so that they get promptly addressed by the city. To the chairman's point, if the door isn't in operation, then the car wash isn't in operation, period. I don't care how long it takes to replace it. They'll figure out a way to replace it if they can't operate it. So there are plenty of things that we can do to mitigate it, but I think it would be, it's favoring certain property owners over others, and that to me is not the role of this commission. So that's my.
I do want to thank Mr. Goldman and all the members of the petitioner group, because I believe they have done as much as they can to mitigate the noise. They've moved the trash, addressed the lighting, and not all petitioners listen as carefully as you have, so I do appreciate that. I have a concern with 3 uses combined. The convenience store is by right within a B1 district. The special uses require special permission. So part of deciding whether it's a special use is whether it is an appropriate use for this site and this surrounding neighborhood. And that takes me back to the initial sentence in the B1 district. Purpose: the B1 Neighborhood Business District is designed to accommodate small retail and service businesses. I don't consider the entirety of your petition to be small. It's a fairly large operation. So while the individual pieces fit on the site, I consider it too large for the surrounding area. I definitely would like to see that site developed, as I think all folks in Lake Forest would, including a number of the neighbors. One of those uses might work. The 3 of them combined seems excessive for the size of the site, for the ingress and egress, and as I've mentioned before, there is no adequate buffer with the residential or the office. The other sites predated the residential. Okay, but those uses are now gone, and you need to come in, as you are, for special permission. And I keep on seeing no buffer with the residential or the office, and I see an intersection that has a fire station, which by its nature has emergency calls all the time, an elevated railroad track crossing that is already considered dangerous because it's so short before you enter the intersection, and a very active church parish community and an active school. Mr. Goldman has mentioned Sunday is their busy day. I believe St. Patrick's also has their busiest day on Sunday. A number of funerals are now pushed to Saturday because people don't have to leave work. They can travel from far. So Saturdays and Sundays, I would think, would be very important. So as I've said, I've been to the Waterway site. I think it's an excellent car wash. It's nicely laid out there. I have problems considering this combined request fitting as a small retail and service business under B1. Now, the city did approve, as Mr. Pickus said, an approved plan in 2008. The buildings were actually larger than what you're requesting. However, the traffic pattern is much cleaner. Our traffic consultant had some issues with the recirculation. And you have overflow parking and a pretty quiet retail store. So in a way, some of these uses of the site, while they still maximize the site, are more passive and are not as detrimental to the neighborhood. That's what I keep on coming back to, and those are just clear zoning issues. And I do believe it affects the health, safety, morals, and general welfare. And that's what I base my concerns on. However, if the petition is successful, I would definitely request, because it is a residential area, I would request shorter hours. And I would certainly request some consideration given the fact the church community is very active on Saturdays and Sundays when they're your busiest days. The landscaping, which Mr. Patera does a great job, I don't want anything that would be so high that it means that when you're heading north on Wesley, you can't see clear onto Everett. And I bring up the point because Lake Forest Bank has a drive-up facility at Bank Lane and Wisconsin, and if anybody's been there, in the summer they have 6-foot-high grass, and it was recently cut down because nobody could see to be able to make the turn successfully. I would also agree with Commissioner Freeman that if the quiet door is not operating, the car wash should not operate. We do know of a potential taking in the future of 11 feet, potentially to expand that intersection. That was brought up at the last meeting. And as I mentioned in an email to Kathy after the March meeting, that we should be certain that if the petitioner is successful, that even within that 11-foot taking, we would have adequate vacuum stations and recirculating lanes and room for reasonable landscaping along Lake Forest requirements. And the last one I would suggest we consider is any liability insurance related to the gas pumps. And I like Kathy's suggestion about removing the buildings if the property is vacated. Thank you.
Mr. Henry.
Well, I think the commissioners know where I am, have had a tendency, in particular with this site, to lean on the owner's right sides of the issues as well. I live in the neighborhood. I've know the corner well. I drive through it 4 times a day at least, and we use a term highest and best use, and if there was a long list of options that made sense for this 11-year vacant site, that would be great. I would again thank the Waterway people for being as patient and as diligent as they've been with this overly arduous process. There were certainly opportunities for you to act faster, but I think you played it well. I think Lake Forest couldn't be clearer about the fact that they're closed for business. Whole Foods, the Ferrari dealership, Pasquazzi's, the list goes on forever. Costco goes on forever about our reluctance to not focus on what the Plan Commission is to do. We've ad nauseum discussed that what is to me, there's nothing to interpret about, yes, these are special use permits, special use permit required, but it's well within the current zoning, and that there's not one argument's been made that these uses somehow, they require the vetting for the special use permit that we've gone through since 2015. And I have no doubt why these people don't do business here anymore. I would say to Commissioner Kerr that on the site, the Pasquazes and BP combined FAR of the commercial buildings was substantially high, I think by a third larger than what's proposed now on the full site. That it's, I would encourage everybody to tread very lightly on these additional requirements. We have business permitting laws, we have hours of operations, we've investigated noise and traffic till if what we want to say is we don't want people to do business here, then we should say it. I say we should make this, we should concentrate on interpreting the balls and strikes of does this meet the plan? Does it meet the overlay? Are we doing what the Plan Commission says to do? We have all sorts of other people who can talk about the things that we've beaten to death. We need business in our town. If we had 1% of the $147 million that Costco makes, we wouldn't have any problems. We could have made it a park. You could buy it from Sandy and make it a park on the proceeds that you generate from one store. We are the unending arrogance and not understanding that when we talk the overwhelming public comments, because it affects them personally and economically and where they live. Great, that's why we're here to vet it. Somebody owns this parcel, it's been empty for 11 years. If we were to say, well, we got a Waterway car wash, we got a Walgreens, we've got a 3-story office building, and we're going to talk about which is the better use, great. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about what I consider to be a very, very eager petitioner to deal with our inquiries, and I have to say I'm surprised that they're still here listening to it. I would have packed up years ago. So I support their petition. I, again, would caution everybody to tread very lightly on how many more hoops we're going to ask these people to jump through. And I think that as a commission, we should, if the idea was that this isn't what we want to do, we should have told them a lot sooner than we're telling them today. So for all of those reasons, I support what's presented today and would ask for a swift approval of what's presented.
Well, I would just like to say that my vote on this is going to depend upon whether, in my judgment, this meets this criteria of a special use permit. That's the sole thing. And I've listened to the testimony, I've listened to a lot, or read this stuff probably 5-6 hours worth. And I really want to say one thing to really comment, Tim, before I go further, that the delay in this project has not been due to City Hall or this commission. It was due to the fact, number one, it was held up for DOT review, and number two, it was held up for the petitioner to get that easement with ComEd straightened away. So to say that this commission has held up this process, or anybody else and staff or whatever held it up, I think it just misses the mark. I really do. So I just want to clear that up. With regard to the standards, I think clearly this meets on point conditions 2 through 6, without question in my mind. It is not going to significantly impair property values. I don't think it's going to appreciably affect. Listen to me, please. I listened to you for 2.5 hours. Okay? So, The question in my mind is, does it comply with special use criteria number 1? Rosemary pointed this out, whether the established maintenance or operation of the special use will not be detrimental to endanger the comfort of the community, especially in my mind, the community nearby. And in my opinion, but for the noise from those blowers that I raised at the March meeting right out of the chute, after having stood for a half hour at the Northbrook site, now I understand why I heard what I heard. But for that noise, I think this would be a slam dunk project in terms of meeting the letter and the spirit of our special use permit criteria. But I am not satisfied with the noise factor and whether it can either be ameliorated, reduced, or whatever, at all. I think we can put a thing on ours. I think a condition that would, you know, if the doors are broken, they have to close it down. Come on. The city of Lake Forest cannot be the police enforcer of this special use permit. You're probably going to have somebody there quite a while. So I'm concerned mainly about the busy days like last January 21st, 57-degree day, and cars streaming through there nonstop, one after another. Now, how frequently is that going to occur? I don't know. But I don't want to put this neighborhood through this, especially the rectory to the north and the office building immediately from the chute. So the thing that really troubles me is that I heard in response to a question, there's no existing car wash with the 3 noise mitigation features confirm what this is going to produce in terms of noise. So I respectfully say to the petitioner and others, as I said, my vote is going to hinge on compliance with, I don't think it complies with number 1. And I'm highly skeptical that it will. I really am. Because petitioner will say, well, you know, we tried our best, but, you know, they'll be back in here if the decibel levels or whatever are higher than what we say it should be. They're going to ask for an exception. No question about it. So I'm really bothered by the decibel levels. I know Monsignor Dempsey said not to worry about numbers. Well, I'm a numbers person, so I worry about them. But we didn't see what the spikes were in that 67 decibel level. And 70 decibel, let me just read you a comparative standards of what 70 decibels and are higher. First of all, 50 to 60 decibels that we saw on this thing, that's 50 is, you know, conversation in a suburban home. 60 is conversation in a restaurant, office, background music, and so forth. And we saw that 71 to 73 for the train. Well, once we get to 70, which is twice as loud as 60, you got examples of a passenger car at 65 miles an hour at 25 feet away from the pavement. You've got even a vacuum cleaner is 70 decibels. And so this doesn't get through that standard for me. And I would prefer that we don't try to impose all sorts of special conditions on that number 1. I suppose I'll have to vote in favor of them, but when it comes to final passage, I'm not in favor.
So may I ask a question, and I mean this in the most respectful way possible. I mean, but for the blowers, it's not a car wash. So
I understand.
So the
Thank
ordinance
you.
specifically calls out car washes as an acceptable use. So I struggle with, I mean, I hear the dilemma that you have, and then I look at the ordinance and the permitted uses that this property owner lives under, owning this property, and I say to myself, of course a car wash has a blower. I mean, and that's what the ordinance allows.
It won't be patronized if it doesn't.
Well, but
Right,
Especially in the
so,
wintertime.
so I mean, I just don't understand how you can read the ordinance and say that that's not consistent with the ordinance. It has to be.
It's noisy.
well, but
Well, of course it is. I mean, that's why it's a car wash, right?
it's a car wash, but a car wash is a special use because the underlying thought of the zoning code is it may not be an appropriate special use at every location within a town.
But then you don't make it part of the B1 district. And the prior uses both required special use. And when we talk about environmental uses, Pasquazi's had bags of fertilizer sitting out in the back. That property had more traffic than this property's projected to have.
Did that come before the Plan Commission?
I don't know. I just know
Exactly.
I know the
And the
ordinance.
gas station-
The ordinance as written requires it. That's what I know.
At this time.
Right.
But those uses, I believe, in both cases, predate the zoning ordinances, which is why
So they wouldn't be approved under this analysis. Pasquazi's could not operate there. So to Tim's point, they have to go to Lake Bluff.
And then if I
well,
could
there
just.
are a number of reasons Pasquazi
If I can
left.
just rebut, as I mentioned to the petitioner, I think that they played it well, Commissioner. I agree with your point completely from March to November 8th, that there's, my comment was that the doing business in Lake Forest and dealing with the Plan Commission has been, it's, the history stands for itself. Any knowledgeable developer knows the history of what it takes to do ground-up retail and retail-esque development in Lake Forest. So that, I think it's all-encompassing. I'm not criticizing our timeliness and response. You're talking from March to November. This started in October of 2015. If you had to carry that parcel, you wouldn't have the patience that's been displayed to this point. I don't.
But I think it's fair, Tim. Some of the delay has been on the part of their
As I
decisions
said,
as how to come back.
And I
so-
said they played
right,
it well.
Right.
I mean, I get it, but you can't be a petitioner and not know Costco, Whole Foods, any ground-up development, McDonald's, anything. And I mean, we've got to get past this, or we're not going to have any new development done in our town.
Well,
And we need the revenue.
I still don't agree with Commissioner Freeman on that one point. A car wash and a gas station are specifically listed as special uses because
Correct. B1 special use.
uses within B1. And I have to reiterate, because they are not appropriate for every location within a B1 district.
I just would rely on the plain reading of the language of the ordinance. If that's the way the city felt, then they shouldn't have included this parcel in the B1 district. And if it was meant to be a park or a residential area, then it would be zoned that way, and it's not.
I don't read the ordinance as you do.
Well, I mean, in fairness, it doesn't seem like there's an appropriate, given the traffic considerations that have been raised, which we can't mitigate, are we going to just, is there no use that's appropriate under the B1? There's no,
Well, certainly, as I pointed out,
well,
there
right, but
was a
that project,
2008
that wasn't
approval.
feasible. Retail is not going to build.
What I am pointing for the record is that the city has approved and found this use acceptable.
Right.
It did provide, just through the passiveness of overflow parking, the back of a store, it didn't have the noise, it didn't have all the lighting, it had better circulation to avoid accidents at that intersection. There are many other points in its favor, and other retail and/or business developments could be approved.
Theoretically, but in 11 years, not one. I mean, what that approval misses is an owner. I mean, a developer, an operator, that's what it misses, which is kind of important because it's not going to be built. And that's the problem. I mean, and so we've talked about this B1 district, we've talked about this eyesore that it is now. And I just think City Council needs to be very cautious have we learned nothing from the McDonald's scenario, that we're going to create these scenarios where the ordinance clearly says that a car wash is a permissible use, and then we're going to say, well, car washes are noisy. I mean, they are noisy. The city knew that when they drafted the ordinance the way they did. So I'm very concerned about the risk that we create to the community as a whole. We have an obligation to the community as a whole, and I think I think this is great debate, by the way. I mean, I think it's really important that everybody have this perspective, and I compliment the neighbors and the petitioner for bringing forth experts so we could look at these issues and try and find ways to mitigate them. And if certain commissioners don't feel that they can be mitigated, then, you vote your conscience on it. But I worry about the plain language of the ordinance, I really do.
How many other intersections would have a fire station, a railroad crossing, a church, and a school? I consider those important factors as well.
All of those existed when the city wrote this ordinance. All of them.
Yes, which is why they made it a special use.
That's why it's before.
And it's not appropriate for every site in the B1 district.
Yeah.
And I don't consider it appropriate for this particular site, but you're quite right, and it's been good discussion.
What's the pleasure of the commission? I think a motion of some sort would be in order.
I would make a motion.
Proceed.
I would make a motion to approve the petition, subject to the following conditions, and I'm going to edit almost all of them, Kathy, sorry, so you're going to have to, so the first condition, I would say that, I'll state it generally first to make it simpler. I would say that the hour should be reduced by an hour at the end for all days of operation. So the condition would be, as currently proposed, the hours of operation are 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. for the gas pumps and convenience store. I think those are appropriate. It's 7:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. for the car wash, 7 days a week. To mitigate off-site impacts, I would recommend that we require as a condition of approval that weekend hours for the car wash be modified to 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and weekday hours be modified to 7:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. The second condition I would make for approval is that rapid closing automated doors be installed and operated at all times at the entrance and exit to the car wash tunnel. So to our earlier point and to the chairman's point, if they're not operational, then the car wash doesn't operate. The exit door should be closed while the blower is operating for no less than 2/3 of the traffic that proceeds through there. That's a tough one. I mean, I think I'd be open to an amendment there that says that it has to be closed at all times that the blower's in operation. I know we heard from Mr. Goldman that might be unworkable. But if it's unworkable, I guess they can take that up with the city council. So maybe I'll make my own amendment. I'll say the exit door should be closed at all times the blower is operational. The other condition would be to, and I think they've already agreed, to replace the windows of the church rectory and the commercial building immediately adjacent to the east of the site. The rectory is to the north of the site. To mitigate sound. Sorry?
Residential units as well?
Yeah, I think what the staff recommended was that there be an assessment of the noise level on those units if determined to be necessary by the city's acoustical engineer to meet the established standard after 6 months of operation. I would, most importantly, I think, require that the noise levels from the car wash not be permitted to exceed 2 dB above the ambient hourly time-weighted average of noise levels in the area, consistent with the petitioner's representations. To make sure that they stay true to that, I would suggest that a post-construction study should be conducted by a consultant hired by the city, but paid for by Waterway before the issuance of the permit. And then additionally, and this is City Council's business, there should be a process that is established so that if there are alleged violations in excess of that 2 dB of the ambient noise, the city has a well-defined process for there to be notice given, measuring of the levels taken, and then of course an opportunity to cure within a certain time period. for any of those violations.
Post-construction, levels.
Yes. So, and again, I think the process would be something that the city council would want to make sure is clear so that residents can raise issues and then have them timely heard, would be the idea there. The exterior lighting should all direct downward, and the source of the light should be shielded from view from off the site. That one is essentially as you have it, Kathy, in number 5. Number 6, I would take as the staff has recommended about material changes to the structures being subject to review. I would add to that one, though, Kathy, your language about the idea that should one or more of the permitted special uses cease on the property, that the operator has an obligation to remove those within a reasonable time period under the direction of the city. And then 7, I would keep the way you have it as far as the building, lighting, landscaping, signage. And as far as the insurance issue raised by Commissioner Kerr, I would say that should be deferred to City Council as it relates to kind of a financial impact to the city that I think is council's purview, not ours. And despite Tim's warning, I have ladened it with all kinds of conditions. But that's my motion.
If you may, I'd like to suggest that maybe a bond be posted for the sound mitigation so that we know that they will take care of it within 6 months or whatever. Do a study within 6 months of completion, post a bond to make sure that additional work needs to be done.
I would accept that as a friendly amendment and make that part of the process that City Council reviews.
And probably should have had a second before we had that comment offered, so was that a second, Commissioner Pickus, before that comment? Thank you.
And then I'll accept Commissioner Pickus's friendly amendment as making that part of the process that City Council implements.
Discussion of the motion.
I would support the motion, but I think that we have to be, again, I'll support the motion, but I think that we need to be good partners with people who want to come do business and spend money and invest in our town.
My view of this is it's regulation run amok. I mean, with all good intentions, I'm sure. I mean, just, as I say, we're going to have a part-time employee just to enforce all of the conditions here. Kathy, could you comment on that?
Yes. Before this goes to the city council, we will work with the city attorney so that the whatever conditions you approve will be worded appropriately to assure that they are enforceable. Some of those obligations may fall on the petitioners, but certainly that is something that we will look at to make sure the conditions are workable.
And I would remind everybody that we had the same issues with the McDonald's. After we had to forfeit the lawsuit and $700,000, there was a number of conditions that had to be met and monitored with that property as well. But again, only after we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to comment that you can see it from that perspective that it's regulation or bureaucracy run amok, but I also see it as a way to try to address the needs of both parties. I mean, we're not calling it black and white. There is some gray here, and I think by being able to see the gray, it allows the process to move forward and not pick winners and losers, as Commissioner Freeman mentioned. So, it's not clean. I get it, but it still finds a way to try to get a path forward here.
Yeah, and I think it gives Waterways an opportunity to improve their business plan as well. You know, if they have to come up with these better ways to soundproof their business, maybe they'll be more welcome in other communities.
Okay. Rosemary, any further comments? Okay, I'll have a roll call on this one. You want to call a roll on this amendment of conditions?
Sure. a motion and a second with a modification for the conditions as recited by Commissioners Freeman and Pickus. And I will call the roll. Commissioner Care?
No.
Commissioner Ruggles?
Aye.
Commissioner Pickus?
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman?
Aye.
Commissioner Henry?
Aye.
Chairman Lay?
No. The motion carries 4-2. Let's see, do we need a final motion as amended, or does that take care of it? Okay. Okay, from here, this matter will go to the city council on a 4-2 vote to recommend approval. And Kathy, do you know when that might be scheduled?
I do not know the date of the city council meeting. We will need to work with the city attorney to craft the ordinance, but the date will be made available on the city's website.
Okay.
Do you want to adjourn
No. We have to do one more thing.
the minutes?
Okay, we will move on to item number 4 in terms of the Oak Knoll project. I need a motion to continue this.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that this matter be continued. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. We took care of it. We took care of it, right? First thing. Yeah.
Yeah, he did.
Okay. Did you have some corrections? No. Okay. Okay, is there anybody here from the public that would like to address the Plan Commission on matters not on the agenda? Seeing none, Kathy, any additional information from staff?
Nothing from staff.
Do we have a December meeting date?
Yes, you will have a December meeting date, and we'll be in touch with you to check attendance.
We'll have Oak Knoll on the agenda?
Correct. I expect Oak Knoll and Chase Bank to be on your agenda.
Okay. Thank you. A motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We are adjourned.